All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday to you all. Happy belated 4th of July if you are an American. Happy month of July. It's hard to believe that we are already sitting in July. I feel like I am still digesting things that happened in January and February. But here we are, the show must go on. Thank you so much for being with me here today. If you are tuning in live, if you are listening after the fact, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the work that I am trying to do here. I did have some technical difficulties yesterday and then again just now today. Thank you for bearing with me while I work through those things. Technology is just such a blessing and a curse sometimes. But let's not dilly-dally over the introduction too much. If this is the first time that you are tuning in and you're wondering what this is, the Newsroom Analysis is a monthly live stream that I've been doing since the beginning of the year, where I pull from the headlines that I get delivered to my inbox every single week, every single day. I have news alerts set up for the various topics of interest that I have, things that I'm researching, people that I like to keep an eye on. And then at the end of every month, I collect all of the notable headlines and we sit and we go through them here together. And I think that it's a really good way to create an archive of past events and the trajectory of things, how things have really played out, because that can get muddled over time. Historical narratives can get changed and morph a bit to reflect current attitudes, and we know how it goes. So from that point of view, I think that this is a worthwhile endeavor. And then also it helps me, and I like to think it helps any of you who are interested in being a part of what I am doing, just kind of keep up to speed with what is currently happening with these various organizations and individuals. I mean, it feels like since 2020 on, this new decade that we're in is all about the truth and bringing the truth to light. So things are happening at lightning speed. In my particular little research niche, which is human rights, particularly within religious sex, it's a really there's a lot happening. It's a really active arena to be in. So today we are going to go over the headlines from the month of June, and I believe I have somewhere in the ballpark of like 20 or so articles, so you know the deal. We're going to go through them. I probably won't read everything in its entirety, but if you want to read through something at a more leisurely pace, you can access all of that via the source document down below. So my browser pulled up here. Alrighty. I also, as I'm getting set up here, I have some links below me on your screen that are for my social media and my creative endeavor over on Substack that is very new, and also my virtual tip jar, my Buy Me a Coffee account. So make use of those if you want to, and also feel free to let me know if you are tuning in live, where you're tuning in from, how your past month has been, how your summer is going. I hope everyone's having a really good summer. But let's go ahead and get into this first headline, shall we? So this is coming out of Zenit. This was published on June 14th. Canadian Jesuits sue former finance director over alleged $6.5 million embezzlement. This headline caught my eye for a couple of reasons that I will get into here in a minute. But this is just, it's kind of an interesting situation, and financial chicanery is surprisingly common, it seems. So anyway, the subheading says the Jesuits, known for their educational and missionary work across Canada and the Americas, claim the diverted funds were intended for the essential pastoral and formation programs, support for elderly and infirm members, training of future Jesuits, spiritual retreats for students, and community outreach efforts. Instead, the money allegedly ended up serving personal benefit, as it so often does. So this is coming out of Ontario. In what could become one of the most sobering financial scandals in Canadian religious life in recent memory, the Jesuits of Canada have filed a civil lawsuit against their former longtime finance director, Barry Lytle, sorry about the pronunciation there, and his wife, Nancy, alleging the misappropriation of more than $6.5 million Canadian dollars. The lawsuit, submitted to Ontario's Superior Court of Justice in Toronto on June 2nd, 2025, opens a complex chapter in the history of a religious order that has been part of Canada's spiritual and cultural fabric for over 4 centuries. Yes, the Jesuits have a very long history in that country, in that part of the world. I remember learning about some of that when I was learning like kind of American history, northwestern world history, American-centric history. It did touch on some of the expansion that happened in Canada, obviously not by the United States, but because of the trade and various historical events that occurred between our fledgling country back in the day and what would go on to become these provinces in Canada. It's significant enough that I remember learning about it in school. And they have been there for a really, really long time. They were massacred. If I'm not mistaken, they were amongst the many massacred by the native peoples who were not happy that they were there. And who can blame them, really? The Jesuits, known for their educational and missionary work across Canada and the Americas, claim the diverted funds were intended for essential pastoral and formation programs, support for elderly and infirm members, training of future Jesuits, spiritual retreats for students, and community outreach efforts. Instead, the money allegedly ended up serving personal benefit. Although criminal charges have yet to be filed, sources close to the matter suggest that further legal action is under consideration. Quote, right now, the priority is recovery, end quote, one source noted, citing the deliberate, stepwise approach of the new provincial superior, Father Jeffrey Burwell, S.J. Once that phase is complete, nothing is off of the table. The case touches a nerve, not only because of its financial scope, but also due to the trusted role Liddell held. He had worked with the Jesuits for over 30 years, retiring in 2024 after serving in a series of increasingly influential financial roles. And that's usually how it goes. He was trusted with what is it, the expression, he was trusted with many is trusted with much, or something like that. But if you prove yourself to be trustworthy in some regards, you're liable to be given further trustworthy type roles down the line, especially in something like the finance world, which is clearly based on being trustworthy or at least insured in some way. So this guy was deeply embedded in the institutional life of the order, managing internal reserves, investment income, and operational surpluses. So this guy was like their personal banker, almost. The alleged malfeasance came to light during internal audits late last year, prompting a confrontation by Father Burwell and, eventually, the decision to bring the matter into the public arena. Liddell and his wife reside in Ontario, where they were active members of a Jesuit-run parish. The small city has been a cornerstone of Jesuit presence since the 19th century. They're saying the sense of betrayal runs deep. A Jesuit source familiar with the investigation. This isn't just an operational loss, it is relational. Barry was part of the fabric here. So yeah. So in 2021, whoops, too far. Where am I? There we go. In 2021, Liddell was featured in a piece celebrating lay collaboration with religious orders, expressing pride in how lay people like him had come to be viewed as essential partners in the Jesuit mission. Woof. Ironically, it was that very trust and integration that gave him sweeping access to the organization's finances. At the time, he reflected warmly on the transformation in ecclesial culture. There's good dialogue now. It's less about who wears a collar and more about shared mission. It's a very symbiotic relationship that I think they're alluding to in a very roundabout way. There is a symbiosis there, a mutual benefit, all parties involved, which is ultimately many times the reasons for why these relationships end up forming in the first place. These people who become a part of the fabric of things, and then they can really end up doing a whole lot of harm. Let's see, scanning through here. Says this isn't the first time a religious organization has faced allegations of financial misconduct, but the case carries a particular weight given the Jesuits' historical presence in Canada. Arriving in 1611, they were among the first European missionaries to live and work with Indigenous communities in what was then New France. Their letters and journals remain invaluable to Canadian historians. Today, the Canadian province includes more than 100 Jesuits and coordinates closely with over 60 Jesuit missionaries from Haiti. That's random. From Haiti to Ontario. That is random. Though the Jesuits globally have often drawn attention for progressive theological leanings, the Canadian province has been notably eclectic in its outreach. Jesuits here have ministered to traditionalist Catholic communities alongside Indigenous groups, urban youth, and academics, an embodiment of their motto, Men for Others. That's interesting. And it's probably, I've been using this turn of phrase a lot, probably overusing it in my personal life a little bit, but I've been thinking about it a lot. The whole concept of Occam's razor, which is, you know, the idea that the most simple, straightforward, logical explanation for something, whatever it may be, is most likely the correct one. So, you know, in a situation like this can read a couple of different ways, but, you know, also trying to be very, very logical about it. They're saying that Jesuits have ministered to traditionalist Catholic communities alongside indigenous groups. And it's like, you know, the more creative side of my brain, if we will, wants to take that and run with it and immediately start thinking about all of these other all of these like conservative Catholic groups that I know about, and people who will go into these impoverished, economically disadvantaged areas to set up like outreach programs and church communities and the whole 9 yards and everything. Like that's the direction that my brain wants to go in, just because like that is what I am looking at so much of the time. But then also, you know, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is most likely the correct one, and the simplest explanation is just that like where there is going to be one religious order or organization doing something, there's probably going to be others, either because there is a need there or because there is some sort of benefit to be gained by being in that area. I mean, I'm just being honest, that's my perception of it. So, you know, it's probably not so surprising that there are other Catholic communities within this province, and that the Jesuits are working alongside other organizations and stuff. It's just kind of par for course, but my brain does like to take it in the other way as well. So, oh no, there's a problem with my internet connection. So this is from Animal Politico, a really awesome news site. They've been releasing some fantastic coverage of the things that have been playing out with Opus Dei in Mexico, and I think they've also had a few pieces talking about the situation in Argentina as well, with the 43 former members of Opus Dei, which, if you're a newcomer here and you're like, Opus Dei, what is that? I have an entire catalog library of content that you can go and sift through that will get you caught up to speed. But it's a Catholic organization, one of many, and one that I keep an eye on. But anyway, they've done coverage on Opus Dei, and here they are presenting some coverage on the Legionaries of Christ. And I wanted to read this because it's recent, it's current, it's interesting, and sadly, it's unsurprising. Whoops, what just happened? Now it's saying, you have a virus. I really don't. Let me pop my screen off here so I can get this fixed. Let's see. Here we go. Try not to tap on anything this time. With a live stream, you get to see all of the behind the scenes. I think I accidentally tapped one of their mini pop-up ads. I should get an ad blocker enabled to help with that a little bit. But I tapped one of those and it was like, you're about to download a virus. I recently switched to using Firefox because I found out that Firefox has a better language translator, slightly better than Google. So that's what I've been switched over to using, but I haven't updated all my like settings and everything for ads. Okay, let me get this pop back on and we will read through this article. So this is a new article, new-ish within the last month. It was published June 13th, 2025. Legionaries of Christ priest accused of rape remanded in custody. So this is about Antonio Cabrera, a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, arrested on June 11th at the AICM after being accused of sexually abusing a minor on several occasions. It says that a former rector at the Faculty of Bioethics at Anahuac University was remanded in custody. In a hearing held this Friday, Antonio Cabrera, a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, was accused of raping a minor. The priest was arrested on June 11th at Mexico City International Airport by members of Interpol and the Attorney General's office. Cabrera was taken into custody and subsequently transferred to the Barrientos prison in Tlanopantla, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, state of Mexico, where he will remain during the proceedings against him. The hearing began this Friday in courtroom number 7. The judge ruled the arrest, which was carried out pursuant to an arrest warrant in order to be lawful. The public prosecutor subsequently requested the formulation of charges, and the fixed control judge, as a precautionary measure, justified preventive detention. The defense requested a doubling of the constitutional deadline to resolve the legal situations. The next hearing will be on June 17th, so it's already passed. In a statement, the Legionaries of Christ said they will remain willing to cooperate with the authorities and will act in accordance with the final resolution. Quote, the Legion of Christ reiterates its willingness to cooperate with the authorities and assures us that if the final resolution is condemnatory, we will support its implementation. Otherwise, we will firmly support the restoration of his good name and public reputation, end quote, of course. So on Thursday, June 12th, he was arrested. Cabrera was arrested in Mexico City Airport. He said, oh, this is interesting. I had read this earlier. It says the priest was close to Marcial Maciel, who's the founder, the creator of the Legionaries of Christ, and unfortunately, tragically, just a prolific abuser of all kinds of people. And I have an entire deep dive episode about that you can go and find if you are interested in learning more. But this priest that has been arrested was close to the founder, who was a prolific abuser. And I have every reason, based on the research that I have done, to believe that the people who were close to Maciel, who have gone on to be found out for abuse, I don't think that that's like just happenstance or kind of an accident or like super random, and who can believe it, just because the nature of the abuse, the fact that some who are abused will go on to abuse others, the whole nature of it, I'm not surprised by that. And this is not the first time that I have heard about a priest of the Legionaries of Christ having been arrested for some type of abuse situation, and then finding out that that priest had a relationship with Maciel. And I think that is pretty significant. But so he was arrested June 11th by personnel from the Attorney General's office. Cabrera was handed over to the Attorney General's office of the state of Mexico, and then he was taken to that penitentiary. According to the Edomex department, the detainee was served a warrant for rape, allegedly assaulting a minor on several occasions at a property located in the municipality of Naucalpan. The State of Mexico Prosecutor's Office detailed that on May 16, 2004, the detainee allegedly subdued the victim in order to assault her, while almost 3 years later, on April 28, 2007, he allegedly threatened to attack her. Similarly, on December 23, 2011, the suspect allegedly sexually assaulted the victim again. The incidents were reported in December 2024 to the Public Prosecutor's Office, who initiated the corresponding investigation for rape. The Catholic congregation issued a statement confirming that the priest's arrest stemmed from a complaint of alleged sexual abuse of a minor, which occurred approximately 20 years ago. He stated that they have been trying to clarify the situation since they became aware of the incident. Oh no, I don't want Bob Evans. Go away. Since they became aware of the incident. However, he noted that they have not received any information from the authorities. So they have this picture, and there's a stupid Bob Evans ad in it that I cannot get to go away. But I don't really understand this. We're led to believe, just because of the context, that this is Cabrera right here, right? And these guys are turned around to hide his face. Perhaps it is because he has not been like... I mean, they sent him to a penitentiary. So clearly, like, they suspect him of having done enough to warrant depriving him of his like freedom of movement and personal liberty. So why do they have the black bar across his eyes? I have done that occasionally in like thumbnails of my videos to just kind of be a dramatic, or like if I want to put like a word across the black bar just to like identify that person as like what I think of them. But that's like an artistic thing that I'm doing. The reason why black bars are usually put across people's eyes is to disguise their identity. But like, I don't understand why they have the black bar if we already know who he is. Strange. If you have any insight into that, let me know, because I had that thought when I originally saw this article. earlier this past month. So this guy, Cabrera, was a priest of Legionaries of Christ and director of the Faculty of Bioethics at Anahuac University. He was director of the Faculty of Bioethics. Ethics are in the name, and yet he was doing this kind of thing. You really cannot make it up. But he was there at that university from 2012 to 2021, and during that same period, he served as director of the Medicine and Ethics Journal at the faculties of bioethics and health sciences at the same university. I mean, I guess, look, you can work anywhere and have any job title. I guess it does not mean that you necessarily personally support, believe, or have like any kind of connection to the thing that you are representing. In 2012, he became the director of the Anahuac Center for Strategic Development and Bioethics. He holds a degree in theology. He's well educated. He has a PhD, all this education and everything, and yet it didn't do any good in this situation. It makes me so sad. Especially because, like I said earlier up in this article, it mentions that he was close to Marcial Maciel, so then that opens up the question in my mind of like potential abuse against this person. Like, there's a human being in all of this, and as like satisfying as it is when somebody, you know, gets found out for something like this, as satisfying as it is to like grab the pitchforks and, you know, call for them to be hanged, there is a human being in all of that too, which is a really uncomfortable thing to have to contend with. I know people don't like thinking about it. You don't want to think about the human being behind these types of acts, but the fact of the matter is it's so important in this particular case because of the type of abuse that we're talking about, because of the fact that so much of the time, you know, this type of thing doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are reasons why people develop these proclivities. There are reasons why they are able to act on them. And there are reasons why when they do and someone tries to speak out about it, they hit so many roadblocks. Like, there are all of these different, it's a very, very nuanced, complex subject. And I was instantly reminded of that reading this article when I saw that they mentioned Maciel. And it's like, Maciel, he's been dead for quite some time now. I don't remember exactly when he passed away, but it's been quite some time in the past. And yet still to this day, his legacy of abuse is continuing to have an impact on people who probably weren't even alive during the same time as Maciel, children who are being preyed upon by people who were groomed, I would say, at least in part, groomed by this man. It's really, really sad. It's really complex. My heart goes out to the souls of all of the people involved, and I hope that there is justice for his victim, because, and any other victims that he might have, because that is so important. And at the end of the day, you know, humans, the humanity of it all aside or not, when there is a crime that has been committed and somebody has been hurt, there needs to be some type of an acknowledgement of that, some type of justice. So anyway, I am going to check on the chat real quick because I have not done that yet. See how things are going. I'm also going to drink some water. Hi, Ohms. Hi, Mike. I'm so glad you guys could be here. Yeah, I've been doing, back to the search engine thing really quick. I've been doing not a lot of research, but enough because it's been so consistently annoying trying to deal with Google Translate and the Chrome Translate like plugin thing that you can install to your browser. It's not good. I don't like it. I've never liked it. It doesn't give a good translation. It messes up tenses and gender and for languages like Spanish, when you're translating from Spanish to English, getting that stuff accurate is really important if you want to be able to understand what you're reading. And Firefox is not perfect. I'm sure if you're sitting here and like reading along with me, you're noticing places like in this Animal Politico article where the translation's not flawless, but it is significantly better. And I honestly have never used Firefox before, but I am liking it for this so far. Typically, before now, I've been using a browser called Brave, and I like it a lot. It's what I've been using for years, but I couldn't get the Firefox plugin on Brave, so I had to switch over. So anyway, now we're on Firefox, and it's not so bad. Mike said, gotta love when they get arrested at an airport. It's as if he knew they were coming and attempted to flee. Yeah. These people, it's not as if these people are never as surprised by being found out and being held accountable for it as everybody else is that the person did the thing that they did in the first place, which I think is interesting. There's a general unwillingness in us to acknowledge that people are so evil, I think. Good stuff. I'm so happy to have you guys in the chat. You guys always have such interesting things to say and insights and everything. So I'm going to back out of here, and we're going to be going to an article, hopefully from the Independent. Yep, if I can get back to it, the Irish Independent. So there was a book that came out in the month of June. I am still waiting to get my copy. Hopefully I'll have it in hand within the next couple of weeks. But there is a book that was written by a former member of Opus Dei, former assistant numerary of Opus Dei from Ireland, named Anne-Marie Allen, and her book is called Serve. And it's about her years in the organization, what she experienced, and how she came out of it on the other side. So there's been a good handful of articles that have been coming out since the release of her book, and she's been doing interviews and going to book readings and signings, and I follow her on social media, so I know all of this, and I'm so excited to see her book being so warmly received. Seems like it's being very warmly received over there, and that makes me really, really happy to see, because I want nothing but success for all these women. But I have two of them pulled up here from the Irish Independent, and both of them are behind a firewall. But what I have screenshots from Anne-Marie. She was kind enough to share some of the media because I don't have a way to get behind the firewall, and she sent me basically screenshots of the article. So I'm going to see if I can get these pulled up, and then we'll kind of like pick our way through them. If you have the ability to want to support good journalism, by all means, you can find these two articles linked down below. So let's see. But I wanted to at least mention the fact that these articles were being published and read some of the things that are being written, just because, like I said, I think it's really, really important to do so. I want to make sure that this stuff is not staying landlocked to the countries where it's happening. You know, that's why as an American, I'm talking about things that are happening in Argentina and Mexico and Ireland and the UK and Poland and the Philippines and everywhere else, because, you know, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, and it has the ability to impact our lives to a far greater extent than I think people are really willing to give it the credit for. And part of what I think has permitted Opus Dei to, if you're speaking specifically about Opus Dei, but I should broaden that and apply it more to most organizations, have depended on the fact that the world is very big and there is a lot of information coming out all the time, because we live in a 24-hour news cycle, and if what information is being published in one country in one language, it very often will not make it to the Western world in English. And so I think a lot of the time these organizations have depended on that fact, and depended on the 24-hour news cycle to kind of bury negative press. And another reason to do what I am doing is to try to drag this stuff more out into the mainstream so that more people know about it, so that people can't say that they never knew or had never heard about it, and maybe so that these organizations can be a little bit less successful in the future, which would be cool. People can maybe be a bit more discerning before they commit to something. Okay, so let me see if I can get this pulled up, because these are like pictures on my desktop instead of a web page. Trying to see if it will. It's picking up my mouse, but it's not picking up the picture, which is really interesting. I don't know if this is going to work, and I don't want to take up too much time trying to get it to work. So what I will do after the live stream is over, I will upload all of these screenshots to my like drive, and I will pop a link for them in the source document down at the bottom. So if you want to go and look through these after the live stream is over, you can go and find them there, and you can download them, share them, feel free to share them. I think that's just what I'm gonna have to do, because I cannot get my software to recognize my other window that I'm trying to open. It's probably me. It's probably not the software's fault. I'm learning new things all the time. But anyway, so there was this article. This was published Friday, June 13th. I'll just read out the headlines and the sub-headlines, and maybe what little bit I can make out, and then we'll move on. But the headline is "My Life in Opus Dei." Quote, "She put her hand into the bag, pulling out a metal chain. It looked like something you would put on an animal." And an extract from her new book, Serve, Cork woman Anne-Marie Allen shares harrowing details of her 7 years under the control of Opus Dei in Ireland. Not long after she was recruited at age 15, Anne-Marie was taken on a trip to Rome, where she signed vows to become an assistant numerary. It would change the course of her life for years to come. And Anne-Marie has shared bits and pieces of her story, although I am sure her book is going to be much more detailed, but she's shared bits and pieces of her experience in Opus Dei in the Financial Times coverage that has come out over the last few years about Opus Dei in Ireland and in the UK. And she's also done quite a few of like podcast interviews and stuff, and I have one here that I saved in the source document down below, where she talks about this book specifically and answers some kind of just general questions about it. So if you are interested in learning more about her experience and what she went through, and maybe you don't want to order the book just yet, I would highly recommend searching out some of the media that is out there about her and the other Irish former assistant numeraries who spoke out 2023. It was early 2023 when that happened. And they have not shut up since, and all power to them. So there's that headline, and then there was this one as well. They did some really beautiful pictures of Anne-Marie that I really, really like them a lot. Unfortunately, you can't see them all behind the paywall here, but if you look at the screenshots later on, they did some really, really nice photos with Anne-Marie, and these women have been put through so much, and were treated as like such a convenient afterthought, that seeing them now like living their lives and having families and wearing beautiful dresses and taking nice photos and drinking wine with their friends, like that, it makes me so incredibly happy to see that, because that proves that there is a life after all of that mess and pain. And seeing Anne-Marie like so vibrantly stepping forward after everything that she's gone through is just, it's wonderful to see. It warms my heart and makes me so happy. But in this other Irish Independent article, the headline says, I'm justifiably, unapologetically angry. Angry that Opus Dei exists, a relic of cruelty with no place in this world. Lured by the promise of a catering course, Anne Marie Allen was recruited into the secretive Catholic organization at 15. She spent the next 7 years as a domestic slave, living a life of self-mortification and servitude. Here, she talks about what really went on behind closed doors and the trauma and shame she was left with. And apparently, says in the first line of this article, the author Tanya Sweeney writes, Anne Marie Allen is showing me exactly where on her upper thigh she would wear her silis, a metal chain with sharp spikes on the links, for 2 hours every day. The higher up and tighter she wore it, the better. And I know that there are former assistant numeraries who have spoken out who say that they still have scarring on their bodies from wearing these mortification devices. It's really, it makes my stomach churn. I'm going to close out a couple of these articles so that I can kind of stay in better control of what's going on, close out the ones that we've already read. Let's see. I want to look at something real quick because it says Legionaries of Christ Catholic priest arrested for alleged sexual abuse. This was June 13th. I'm wondering, is this the same? It looks like the same guy. It's interesting here that they don't say his name, but then in the last one they did. They said his name was Antonio whatever. Yeah, same faculty of bioethics at Anahuac University. Again with the bar over the eyes though. And I think because of the way this was set up, when I originally saved it, I thought it was talking about somebody else. Because I saw the last article from Animal Politico first, where they address the guy by name and list his, like, professional background, history, and all that. But because of the different picture and the bar over the eyes, I was like, oh, maybe this is somebody different. Again, with the bar over the eyes, that's a really interesting choice. Again, because normally when I've seen that done, it's been to disguise somebody's identity. But I mean, they sent this guy to a penitentiary, so like, I think he's known, And I just think that's really interesting. I want to look at the chat real quick and see if does anyone understand? Mike said they may get facial reconstruction surgery, but the eyes will stay the same. It's crazy what people can do to rehab their reputation and everything that has happened to them. Frank McAvoy said, I read a book on Opus Dei 20 years ago. Opus Dei in that book seemed harmless to me. It had its disciplines, but there was nothing negative I would remember if it had. It's really, really difficult to have to come to terms with the fact that your experience with something might not have been as common as you thought, or it was not the standard across the board like you thought that it was. And I think that you see people, Frank, I have a lot of sympathy for you, and a lot of sympathy for how you are probably feeling, because I have been there myself, not with Opus Dei or the Legionaries of Christ, but just with religion in general, with the Catholic Church in particular, and the Catholic Church's teaching, having to, or the Catholic Church's history, having to come to terms with things that have happened to people, real, actual events, atrocities, horrible crimes against humanity that were committed, and having to come to terms with that and decide what I am going to do now that I have that information is very, very difficult. And for anybody who may be watching this, and Frank, you say you're not an Opus Dei member, it wouldn't matter if you were or you weren't to me. But for anybody who is, and maybe you are having very complicated feelings because you're kind of going through some cognitive dissonance, maybe you're learning about some hard truths for the first time about something that you really, really cared about, please know that that is not easy. I know that it is very difficult. I understand why people so often have negative reactions or like get angry when they're confronted with stuff like this, because it's very, very upsetting. And it's not, I mean, this isn't good news by any stretch of the imagination. So I just want to mention that I understand and that I see all of that. But yes, there is a lot of biased. I mean, everything is biased. First of all, Mike said, or Frank said, the book might have its own bias. Everything has a bias. Everyone has a bias. I'm never going to sit here and say I am presenting an unbiased perspective on these events or these people or whatever it is that I'm talking about, because that would be an incredibly brain dead thing for me to say, because there's absolutely no way to come into something as a human being. We're not computers. We can't come into something without biases, past experiences, all of these other like environmental inputs impacting how we perceive and engage with information. So there's a bias in everything. The best that we can do is try to be aware of our biases and then do something about them, or at least be honest about them. You know, my bias in this case is that, you know, I think a lot of the time, unfortunately, organized religion causes a lot of harm. And you see ample examples of that. It's all over the place. That's my bias. And you know, when it comes to some of these organizations in particular, my bias is that like I don't like them. I'm not going to pretend as if I do. I can delineate between an organization as like, you know, an entity and the individual people that make it up, and I can extend, like I said, I can extend empathy to people in these situations. But I still have a bias in the fact that I don't love these organizations. I don't like them. I don't think that they've delivered on the things that they claimed that they were intending to do in the beginning. And I think that the world would be better off if we didn't have them anymore. And that's my bias. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with bias, because on a certain level it's just how we engage with information and perceive things. And I'm never going to perceive something the exact same way that you are going to perceive something. You know, my husband and I will witness the exact same sidewalk in front of us, and we will come away with completely different takeaways from that experience, completely different things that we noticed, different things that stood out to us. Something will bother one of us, doesn't bother the other person. Like, we are, for all that we try to reach out and connect and have communities, we are at the end of the day going through the world and experiencing it in a very self-centered way. And there really is not anything that you can do about that except to try to be aware of it and then to be honest about that. So that's my spiel about bias. Anytime somebody says that they have an unbiased source, I immediately see red flags. And anytime anybody comes at me sideways for having a bias, I want to laugh at them. Just because if you think that there is such a thing as unbiased information, honey child, you've got a lot to learn. Anyway, moving on. Close this out. So this is a news article from La Vanguardia, Sociedad, translated. Opus Dei submits its new statutes to the Holy See for approval, finally. So this was published June 11th. This is from Madrid. It says the prelate of Opus Dei, which, by the way, somebody let me know if you know anything about Opus Dei, like current changes within the hierarchy and stuff, because admittedly I don't necessarily always follow that super closely, but I had read something somewhere saying that the prelate, the like head honcho of Opus Dei, that he's no longer called a prelate, but he's called like it was a weird word. It was like almost like manager or something like that. Yeah, it was. I again, if you know, then let me know. Maybe it was fake news. I can't remember where I saw it, but it was saying that like the term prelate has been done away with, and now the prelate is called something different, and maybe it was like magistrate, or it was something weird. It was something strange. Anyway, the head honcho of Opus Dei announced Wednesday in a message on his website that the work has submitted the new statutes it has drafted to the Holy See for approval. Quote, I want to inform you about the work on adapting the statutes. It was planned to complete the review at the General Congress, but as you know, due to the vacancy in the seat, it was deemed appropriate not to do so, end quote, explained Fernando Aquiles. That's interesting. I'll come back to that in a second. The congressmen gave their positive opinion so that with the new council and advisory board, we could conclude the revision of the statutes and submit them to the Holy See for approval, which we did today. It has been a 3-year journey, accompanied by everyone's prayers, which I ask you to intensify in this final stage, he requested. So, blah, 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 new statutes. It says that, yes, in August 2023, Pope Francis signed a motu proprio declaring Opus Dei an association of clergy, urging the organization founded by Jose Maria Escrivá de Balaguer to promote new statutes. The Pope indicated the personal prelature is assimilated to public clerical associations of the pontifical right with the power to incarnate clergy, and that the prelate acts as, there it is, moderator, endowed with the faculties of the ordinary. Regarding the laity, Francis noted that they can dedicate themselves to the apostolic works of the personal prelature, but the form of this organic cooperation and the principal duties and rights related to it will be conveniently determined in the statutes, which the work is reforming at the express request of Francis, and which it seeks to align also with the charisma received from the founder, since the interpretation of the new canons would suggest that they would have to depend on the diocese in which they reside. Yes. So, they're not saying it here, but I know this because I am a frequent reader on Opus Dei Exposed and Opus Libris. The big question with these statutes, well, one of the big ones, maybe the biggest, it's the one that I've been seeing discussed the most, has centered around non-religious people's status within Opus Dei. So as it says here, where was it? So the Pope, so I think they mean Pope Francis, indicated that the personal prelature, which Opus Dei is a personal prelature, which is a special type of religious organization that answers only to the Pope. It's a whole thing. Go Google it. But he said that it's assimilated to public clerical associations of pontifical right with the power to incarnate clergy, meaning that they can have priests, basically. But the role of lay people, non-religious people, is a lot less clear. And according to a canon law, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, it's like canon 200 and something, lay persons are just not prohibited, but like it's not within the way canon law is written for lay people to be under the authority of a religious organization like this when they are not religious members themselves. You know, people in Opus Dei, that's the big thing about Opus Dei, is that like the members don't take vows, right? They make promises, and they're not, you know, they're supposed to be ordinary people living in the world and all this other stuff. So they're very clearly, per Jose Maria Escriva's like whole vision for everything, very clearly not religious, which would preclude them from being under the authority of Opus Dei. It would mean that they would answer to, be under the authority of whatever the bishop for the like archdiocese, they'd be with it under the authority of the archdiocese, whatever archdiocese they happen to be in, which is, if you don't know, an archdiocese is like a region, basically, and there are many, many archdioceses, and every single archdiocese has a bishop and people who run it, and it's basically just like breaking the church up into like manageable units. You know, you have the Archdiocese of New Orleans and the Archdiocese of Indianapolis and so on and so forth. Anyway, the people would be under the archdiocese, not under Opus Dei, and so Opus Dei would have no authority over those people's lives. You know, they could not enforce any type of anything. They would have, and people would be able to participate if they want to, and sort of like be a part of things. But the language that I have seen has basically said that there's no way for them to actually be like members, actual members, which has been the language really up until now. And so them having to change that is potentially a really big deal. And what I wanted to circle back to up here a little bit a minute ago, because I thought this was really funny. it says that they were working on them, but then they quit working on them. Where was this? Yes. So they were working on them and they were supposed to do the review at the General Congress, which they were all headed to, when Pope Francis kicked the can. And so they said, Opus Dei, whatever, said that, like, oh, we're, taking a pause on this thing to, like, grieve with the church and pray and everything else. But what it really came down to, and I was seeing conversations about this all over the place online, what it really came down to was, like, they were hoping that, like, basically they weren't going to get another Francis. Whoever became the next pope wasn't going to be another kind of, like, more liberally minded pope, and they would be able to kind of just push having to submit these revised statutes to, like, a back burner somewhere kind of just permanently, and just hope that it, like, kind of gets forgotten about. Because, as I have mentioned in the past, and you can read this for yourself in the International Ecclesiastical Institutional Complaint of Regulatory Fraud against the Vatican, the Holy See, and the members of Opus Dei themselves. You can Google it and find it. It's a document. It's a 20-page document that was written and submitted to the Vatican by former members of Opus Dei back in, like, when did this happen? 2023, I think. You can go and read it, and in that document, towards the end of it, they talk about how, Opus Dei the plan has always been to cede without conceding, with the intention of recovering. That's the exact language that is used, meaning that they were waiting, have been waiting for this pope that they had then, or that, so, any pope they have currently or a future one, to pass away, to die, essentially, so that they can try to reclaim what Jose Maria Escriva envisioned for the organization, which was to carry out this re-Christianization of the entire world. And that re-Christianization is, of course, not what you would consider sort of maybe the more mainstream Christian, like, peace and love Jesus vibe. It's a very, very specific slant on what it means to be a Christian, or I should say what it means to be a Catholic. So there's a whole lot of stuff that is tied up into this, and it's been really, really interesting to see them kind of coming to terms with the fact that they were not going to be able to just push this off to, infinitum whenever. They were going to have to actually deal with it, and yeah, here they are. Here they are dealing with it. So it'll be really interesting to see. As of yet, as far as I know, there's been no news about this situation, no further developments. Maybe that will change this month. It'll be interesting to see if it does, and if it does, I'll definitely be bringing it up at the next newsroom analysis. So, but I wanted to mention that just because for the membership piece of it, this situation is important. I understand, like, talking about, like, the Vatican and the Pope and, like, canon law and everything can get very dry and very boring very, very fast. And most of the time, yes, it's a religious organization, and yes, I have done my fair share of soapboxing about the Opus Dei's relationship with the Vatican and everything, but it's not something that I hyperfixate on as much as some others do. But in this particular case, I think that it's important because of what it represents to people who are Catholic, who are involved in this organization, who are, potentially looking to the Vatican for some type of clarity on things. I mean, I think at this point, thanks to the internet and smartphones, I don't think Opus Dei has been able to, like, keep an entire lid on everything that's happening. So, like, people are kind of watching to see what is going to happen. And I think the fact that this got published under Society in a magazine like this is kind of telling, potentially. Or maybe they did it because I thought nobody would read it here. Maybe nobody reads the Society section. I don't know. So here's another Irish Independent article, a fantastic article. Again, we'll just read what of it we can, but then I'll have those screenshots linked, and you'll be able to pull them up. The Real Handmaid's Tale, a woman's story of life, a woman's story of a life of drudgery inside Opus Dei. Anne-Marie Allen dreamed of being a chef and was lured into the powerful Catholic institution with broken promises at the age of just 15. Breaking free from its clutches was no easy task. Her new book, Serve, details her 7 years of neglect, coercion, and fear inside the organization. So this was written, published Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, by Sarah MacDonald. And I'll just read this first little bit here. It says, Anne-Marie Allen's coming-of-age memoir, Serve, My Lost Years at the Heart of Opus Dei, documents her almost 7 years from the age of 15 in the secretive Catholic movement. She lifts the veil on the domestic servitude which young Irish girls like her were lured into with the promise of a vocational training that never materialized. Instead, she was inveigled into becoming an assistant numerary. That's a good word. That is not a word you see very often. Into becoming an assistant numerary, the lowest rank in Opus Dei's hierarchical and classist structures. And I'm sure if you know anything about this organization, I don't have to tell you that it was all downhill from there. Luckily not forever, though. And she has reclaimed her life and found success and found her voice. And that is the main thing. If you want to purchase her book, you can purchase it from sellers in the UK. I was able to do it on Amazon by going over to like my account information. It had like a little flag, basically like an American flag drop down thing, and I was able to tap that and select the UK, and I searched for her book that way and was able to find it and order it to my address in the United States. It was kind of interesting. I'd never done it before. If you want to buy a copy of her book, I have it linked on my website, which is down in the description, over on the mix of, what's my tab called? It's like a mix of truth and propaganda on my website. I have her book in there. So if you would like to, and it's like linked to Amazon, so if you would like to buy it there, you can. And it is a referral code. So if you do, then I get a small kickback at no cost to you. Shoo. Drink some water, look at the chat. Hi, Michael Onyx. I'm so glad you could tune in. Oh, wow. Alabaster said, Catholic priests are on food stamps in my area. Those just got canceled. It is really, really sad. This is like a sidebar, but it is to me, and it's always been kind of sad to see the quality of life that a lot of priests have. I mean, it's not a glamorous life for a lot of these people. I think that a lot of people become priests for very like altruistic good reasons. But I've talked to people who were studying in the seminary, for example, studying to become a priest or something like that, about what it's like, the environment in these seminaries, the fact that, you take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, so like you have nothing, and that places you, this is interesting, and I've heard this from more than just one person, that places you at risk of being kind of snapped up by organizations like this one on my screen right now, who need people to further their mission and everything. So it makes me sad to think about priests on food stamps, just because I feel like that's not right. And I don't know, it's just the situation with priests in general. There's a lot, honestly, I've never gotten into it, and now is probably not the time, but there's a lot about celibacy in the Catholic Church that really just bums me out and makes me really sad, because we're human beings, we're supposed to have families and community and loved ones, and we're supposed to be able to connect, and on a very like an emotional level, mental level, physical level, like that is a fact of human life. We can't completely separate the like biological urges that we all have, because we're human beings. Like that's just a part of being human. You can't completely shut that off. And I think when you try to do that, or when you think that you can just control it through willpower, you end up potentially creating an environment for some very disordered stuff to happen. So anyway, that's sad to see and to hear about. And I hope that if there are people who are on food stamps, Catholic priests or otherwise, I mean, I just hope that communities start coming together. I do think you're seeing that more, but like we really have got to take care of each other, because nobody's coming to bail us out. So we're on our own. So anyway, this is an article from Info Vaticana. Opus Dei denies the storm while drowning, which is a pretty strong headline. So this is the current head honcho, Fernando. And this was written, published June 14th. Says, the scene is as grotesque as it is predictable. Opus Dei is having its foundations reformed under the pretext of ad charisma tuendum. Its dicastery has been changed. Its bishop has been removed. It has been required to reform its statutes for 2 years. And now that they have finally submitted a proposal to the Pope, they are publishing a question and answer article as if they were talking about changing the lyrics of the work's hymn. But no, they are not taking away the long live the Father. They are taking away the ground. And they continue to claim that what is falling on them is holy water, even if it smells like something else. In this statement, updated on June 11th, Opus Dei responds with the classic, monotonous and self-indulgent voice to questions that no one has asked them. Quote, is it true that they have given us an ultimatum? No way. We have only presented the new statutes after 2 years, a vacant see, and a new pope because we like the synodal and participatory process, which is word salad. Of course, none of this prevents us from continuing to deny that there was pressure, imposition, or even the slightest concession to the suspicion that Pope Francis wanted to reduce the work's influence. The problem isn't the amputation, but the failure to administer anesthesia. In April, an ordinary Congress was convened, which, due to the Pope's death, ended up being a little Congress to renew offices and bless decisions already made by others. They tried to score a goal against Rome, and Leo summoned them on his first day in office, reminding them that they owed him some statutes. The prelate, by the way, met with Leo XIV and, according to the note, informed him of the state of the work. We can imagine the scene, the Pope nodding gravely while looking at the pages, and the prelate trying to convey enthusiasm for something that everyone knows is nothing more than the last chapter of a carefully concealed surrender. Quote, nothing is happening, we just changed the legal framework and the spirit, end quote. One of the gems of this text is the way it attempts to explain that the legal framework does not affect the lives of the faithful. Of course, because we all know that when an institution loses its original structure, changes dicastery, its head is denied episcopal rank, and is required to adopt new statutes drafted under outside supervision, what doesn't change is the essentials. That is, they move your house, they fire you from your job, they assign you a legal guardian, and they tell you it's not a big deal that you're still you. And if you're not convinced, you've misunderstood charisma. Of course, the text clarifies that the changes will not be made public until the Pope approves them. That is, we won't know what has been negotiated, compromised, or amended until there's nothing left to discuss. Transparency a la carte, or rather a la Romana. Meanwhile, Opus Dei repeats its favorite refrain, obedience, fidelity, unity, as if repeating it would be enough to halt the tectonic shift under their feet. But fear not, the charisma will remain intact, they say. Perhaps one day they will also continue to exist in the form of a private association of the faithful, but with the charisma intact. At this point, it's clear that anyone who wants to defend the integrity of Opus Dei has two options. Either acknowledge that they are being dismantled step by step from Rome, or continue playing the stupid game of everything is fine, without defending them, because they also bear their share of blame in the recent history of the church. We at least won't be sycophants of their institutional self-deception. Boom. I thought that was a really really concise, fun little article that says a lot of what I am also thinking. So this is one of the interviews. I linked it in the source document if you would like to listen to it. Although Anne-Marie has done other interviews through RTE Radio 1. But it says that Anne Marie Allen talks about her experiences with Opus Dei as a young woman in the late 1970s. Her biography, Serve, tells the story of her path from initially joining a training course to becoming an assistant numerary. Anne Marie describes how immersing herself in education allowed her to thrive in her life after Opus Dei. It's pretty good. I listened to it. It's not very long, about less than an hour, I think. So give it a listen if you would like. So I did manage to find an article without a paywall about this book, and so I think it has a lot of the same quotes and information that would have been in the Independent Irish articles, so we will read through this. So the headline is, this was published Wednesday, June 18th, Silence, Chains, and Whips, Irish Woman Alleges Disturbing Regime Inside Opus Dei, Ireland. It's written by Martin Osborne. While Opus Dei has never been a dedicated center in Kildare, they have full apology in advance if I mispronounce any of these Irish proper nouns. I think Irish Gaelic is beautiful. I think the history of Ireland, the culture is just so vibrant and fantastic. I'm going to be fully honest, I can't read Gaelic, and I probably am mispronouncing a lot, so full apologies in advance. But, so anyway, they're in Ireland. They have had temporary or episodic involvement in the area through pastoral work in this Kildare. A woman says she was recruited into Ireland's Opus Dei under false pretenses at age 15 in the 1970s. What she thought was a catering course became, she alleges, 7 years of unpaid labor, religious control, and psychological harm. Anne Marie Allen is speaking publicly for the first time about what she calls a disturbing world of mortification, manipulation, and a deeply gendered form of religious coercion. While Opus Dei has never had a dedicated center, they already said that, we were approached by people in this organization, that were very well presented, that knew exactly what they were doing. We were made promises, attending a good course that would give me a good job at the end of the day and good qualifications. That's not what it turned out to be. The recruitment started that first evening. That night, these are quotes, I believe, from her book, I would think, but anyway, quotes attributed to Anne Marie. Quote, that night, the recruitment started. They started to tell us about Opus Dei, the founder, what it was about. It was only a matter of months, really, until I actually joined as an assistant numerary. We were targeted to be recruited as assistant numeraries, a lower grade in Opus Dei. They provided free domestic service, catering, laundry, hospitality. I was told that I had a vocation as big as a house. You were called at 6:30 in the morning, went to prayer, and you started work at about 8 o'clock. You worked all day, maybe got home at 9 p.m., half 9. That was 7 days a week. There were silent periods as well. You were under supervision all of the time, and you were to be obedient to the directors of Opus Dei and to serve them. It was all about service and servitude. When asked by KFM if Opus Dei controlled women, Ms. Allen said, oh, absolutely. They're looking for people that will join Opus Dei, celibate members, young girls that were impressionable, maybe that were idealistic, good workers. We were there for domestic servitude, and that was our role for our lives, our celibate lives. So yeah, that's 100% correct. During her time with Opus Dei, Ms. Allen said self-mortification was not encouraged, but forced. Quote, mortification encompassed a load of different things on a daily basis, but two of the main things, wearing a chain and using a whip on a Sunday, a load of links with the barbs turned in. You tied it to your leg for 2 hours a day. And then you had a whip that you hit yourself with on the back every Saturday, and sometimes that could be increased if you were doubting your vocation. It also involved sleeping on the floor and sleeping without a pillow. I see it as a form of self-harm. It wasn't encouraged. I was told to do it. I was shouting at the television. She was punished for this, and she talks about this in the Financial Times article as well. I was shouting at the television, and I was using some unparliamentary language. I got a thing called a fraternal correction, a severe fraternal correction afterwards, that I hadn't behaved like a saint, that I had behaved like an animal. You couldn't say, look, that's ridiculous, so you just had to say thank you. Once you leave Opus Dei, you're not mentioned. You're treated as if you're dead. I was told not to get in contact. Ms. Allen has met with others who left the religious group. She said some people worked with Opus Dei as recently as 2000, with some women spending over 50 years working for the group. We found each other within the last few years. It's been a magnificent experience to see how they have survived, really, and how they've overcome the trauma. Thousands of women, like myself, who left Opus Dei, left without pension payments, left without money or savings or qualifications, she said. These people in particular need to be compensated for the time that they gave to Opus Dei and that their lives should be made comfortable. KFM reached out to Opus Dei. A spokesperson said they would be interested in a discussion with Ms. Allen. When asked if that is something she would consider, Ms. Allen said, absolutely not. No, I won't. And to any teen girl approached today, run. Run the other way and go home to your parents as quickly as possible. In a statement to KFM, Opus Dei said they have long offered spiritual formation activities to young people to inspire them to practice Christian virtues, holy cow, sorry, to help them become women and men of integrity who contribute to society by living out the Christian message in their daily lives. They said, we always seek to ensure parental involvement, blah, blah, blah. They're very sad by everything that's happened, of course. Many of these accounts do not accord with those of long-standing members. Of course not. No true Scotsman's fallacy. We're very sorry. That is good, but probably, I don't know if that's... Saying sorry is a good place to start. Says, however, so let's see. Says, nonetheless, it is clear that Anne-Marie has been deeply affected, which she attributes to her time with us, and that we are profoundly sorry. We've repeated publicly said that we want to listen and learn from individuals' testimonies. What does that mean? What does that mean? Yes, you have said that so many times, but what does that actually mean? I don't see you organizing any type of meaningful anything, and an email address for people to send their complaints to is not enough, does not count. I am sorry, not sorry. That is just a sham. And they remain open and blah 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 blah. Yes, what does it mean? And what are you actually doing to put that into practice? Or are you just saying it? All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about somebody else. So this is somebody interesting. I can't recall if I've mentioned him in past live streams or not. If I haven't, then this is a good introduction, and if I had, then forgive me for repeating myself. But I became aware of this guy. Italo Marsili is the way that I pronounce his name. I'm probably putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable, but he is Brazilian and reported to be a member of Opus Dei. He is some sort of mental health personality, and he has these like self-help programs that people can do in Brazil that I guess are apparently very, very popular with certain sectors of people there. The way that I would describe him based off of my like kind of just preliminary understanding is he's kind of like a Brazilian Jordan Peterson, but maybe less well educated, if you can imagine it. That's what I've been told by Brazilian people, okay? People from that country have told me that he is not nearly as, he doesn't have nearly the clout that somebody like Jordan Peterson does, but oh, he wants it bad. He wants it bad. And so we're going to learn a little bit about him today. This is Gazeta do Povo, and he is a new columnist, so they're kind of introducing him, and this is kind of fluff, but I think it does give you a basic understanding of like who this guy is, and it's just interesting. And at some point, I'm going to be looking into him a little bit more, so why not start bringing him up now, right? I've got the alert set up. I might as well tell you about what it sends me. So in this article, which was published by the Gazette, was published June 17th, says, considered the most influential psychiatrist in Brazil. So kind of giving me Enrique Rojas Montes vibes a little bit, if you get that reference, if you saw my deep dive into that individual. If you haven't, you should, because I worked really hard on it for like 9 months, so I'd appreciate it. But anyway, this Enrique Rojas Montes is also an influential psychiatrist, but he's in Spain. So Italo Marsili is over here in Brazil cornering the market, and he's now a columnist for Gazeta do Povo. He joined the newspaper's more than 40 columnists, bringing an exclusive point of view to subscribers. And you can click here to read his debut column if you so wish. It says, a doctor graduated from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Marsili completed his master's degree in medicine at the University of Lisbon. With over 10 years of experience, he served in the army as the head of medical clinics. Today, he is one of the most respected professionals in his field and in public life due to his consistent positions. So anyway, Italo Marsili, little blip to have on your radar, just to be aware of. At some point, he may become more prevalent. He's at least somebody to know about, because again, he is rumored to be connected to Opus Dei, and from what I have researched so far and what I have seen, I'm getting a lot of the same kind of vibes that I got from Enrique Rojas Montes, which is honestly, it's interesting and it's kind of scary if you know anything about Rojas and what he has done to people. That's kind of scary. But anyway, I will keep my finger on that pulse, and when something comes up that I think is interesting or we should talk about, I will let you know about him. But moving on, this is from the Irish Times. Lots of stuff out of Ireland this month. Dispute over failed £23 million sale of Leopardstown site by religious order. Developer Remor Magna is suing landowners, Legionaries of Christ in Ireland. So, Legionaries of Christ once again in the news for reasons other than good. The sale of religious order-owned land in Leopardstown, South Dublin, to a developer for £23 million has fallen through due to a dispute over the provision of a school on part of the site, the commercial court has heard. Developer Rimor Magna Ltd. is suing the trustees of the Legionaries of Christ in Ireland, owners of the land at Rocklands, which was to be sold to Rimor, with a provision that it would also construct a new faith center and school to replace the existing center in St. Michael's House Special School. It is claimed that the sale fell through after a 2022 planning application for the school, faith center, and 2 office buildings was rejected on the grounds that the development failed to provide for a mainstream primary and post-primary school in accordance with the Department of Education requirements. The claims were denied. They went back to court again on Monday. It says the application was made by Marcus Doling SC for the defendants, who said his clients did not want a substantial damages claim hanging over them and were seeking an expeditious hearing. Niall F. Buckley SC for Remor said that while not opposing the application for entry to the fast-track court, his side was arguing that it was given to understand by the defendants that Department of Education support was available for the plan, but it was not. Mr. Justice Mark Sanfey said that while there had been an argument about delay in bringing the proceedings, any culpable delay was on the part of Remor rather than the defendants. So lots of back and forth and infighting. Let's see. Trustees terminated the contract with Remor in November 2024 over its failure to comply with a special condition that it secure an acceptable grant of planning permission. So I always think it is interesting. It says here that they're claiming to have spent more than £1.7 million on efforts to secure planning permissions, and the defendants deny the claims, including claims for damages brought by the company Remor Limited Ltd. So I always think it's interesting whenever there are legal disputes between a religious order and like another party, and it's about real estate specifically. I have been doing research on a deep dive that I am hoping to have out within probably the next month. I have another video that'll be coming out sooner than that, maybe this coming week if everything goes according to plan. That's an interview with somebody that I think you guys will be happy that I've connected with, and I think it'll be a conversation people will appreciate. But anyway, for this deep dive, this is always how it goes with deep dives, and this is part of the reason why it takes so long. You end up learning a whole lot more. Like, things become very complex very quickly, and you end up learning a whole lot more about a whole lot of other stuff that you weren't really expecting to. And in particular, in this case, with this deep dive, I learned about something that I had never heard of before called land trafficking. And it's something that one specific religious organization down in South America has been accused of on a number of occasions. But then I also... I glanced over at the chat just now, and Mike said land fraud is big business. It is huge business, particularly because, and this is kind of like my point in bringing all this up and what I've kind of learned, you know, these religious organizations like the Legionaries of Christ, or Opus Dei, or Sodalitium Christianae Vitae, or Miles Christi, or whatever, like all these different Catholic organizations, they are supposed to abide by some like kind of standard general practices, like not keeping a lot of money, and doing good works, and generally trying to be like a force for good in the world and not a menace. Like, those are generally the types of things that religious organizations should probably strive for. And one of the things that they should not be doing is hoarding wealth, because it obviously looks very, very bad if you have this organization that's claiming to be so humble and good that's like hoarding wealth. And so in order to not get hemmed up, and in order to have like a zero on their balance sheet, basically, these organizations, and this is not just religious organizations either, by the way, this, like Mike said, land fraud is a big business. Lots of people do this. They hide their assets, their actual money, hide it for, whatever. They non-liquidate it into, like, real estate, for example, would be a good place to put it, because it's like a non-liquid asset that isn't going to, grossly lose value over time. You can kind of have that and hang on to it, and as long as you can maintain it and take care of it, which becomes a problem, and that's something that we've seen in past newsroom analyses with Opus Dei specifically. They are having issues taking care of these huge manses and castles and these exorbitant real estate properties that they bought under, if reporting from Gareth Gore is to be believed, under less than altruistic motivations. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. The whole land fraud, land trafficking thing, the whole like religious organizations owning real estate, what that can mean. It's really, really interesting, and land trafficking is not something that I had really known too much about. And I'm not going to get into it too much here because I get into it in that deep dive, and I'm going to just hold my cards until then. But if you're interested in looking into it, I highly recommend it. I don't know how common it is here in the United States. There are probably types of land trafficking that happen, but it's probably a little bit different. But places like Peru, for example, or other South American countries too. I read a research paper that was about Brazil or something. Countries down there have had a real problem with land trafficking. So anyway, it's very, very interesting. I'm learning new stuff all the time, and that's why I enjoy sharing it with you guys, because then I feel like I get to pass that on to somebody else, and it's just like some little tidbit of information. And like, don't take that and just like run with it. If you're interested, do some more research and like educate yourself a little bit more about it, because all this stuff is really interesting. And there's so much to know. So, for example, there's this article. This is published June 21st, 2025 by Salvatore Cernuzio. Pope urges church to foster a culture that does not tolerate abuse. This is from bishopaccountability.org. This is coming from a Vatican News article out of Peru. It says Pope Leo sends a message on the occasion of a Peruvian theater performance honoring investigative journalist Paolo Uyugaz and calls for a culture that does not tolerate any kind of abuse in the church and for the defense of press freedom. He praises journalists who expose abuse, stating that silencing them threatens democracy and undermines the gospel's call for justice and truth, which is what I've been saying. I guess even a broken clock can be right twice a day. In a message against all forms of abuse, Pope Leo has called for a cultural transformation within the Catholic Church. It is necessary to eradicate throughout the Church a culture of prevention that does not tolerate any form of abuse of power or authority, of conscience or spirituality, of sexual abuse, he writes. His words were read at the performance of the theatrical production Proyecto Ugaz, currently running in Lima, Peru. The play honors investigative journalist Paola Ugaz, known for her reporting on the now-suppressed Sodalitium, and who has faced sustained harassment for her work. Drawing on Ugaz's example, the Pope issued a firm defense of press freedom. Whenever a journalist is silenced, the democratic soul of a nation is weakened. The Pope's message centers on two key themes that underlie the theatrical production: the fight against abuse and the essential role of truthful, independent journalism. Proyecto Ugaz highlights Ugaz's years-long investigation into the Sodalitium Christianae Vitae, a powerful lay movement in Latin America that Pope Francis formally suppressed on April 14th due to multiple allegations of abuse and corruption, including against its founder, Louis Fagari. A Vatican investigation concluded the group lacked any foundational charism. Paola Ugaz, together with journalist Pedro Salinas, co-authored a 2015 book exposing testimony from victims of the Sodalitium. That book was called Half Monks, Half Soldiers. Their work spurred investigations by Peruvian authorities and eventually led to Vatican intervention. However, Ugaz has since faced legal harassment and online attacks. In November 2022, she sought protection for herself and 3 other journalists from Pope Francis, who received them personally in December of that year and expressed his support. Now, under Pope Leo, that support continues and deepens. The Pope, well informed about the Sodalitium case and Ugaz's role, publicly embraced her during a meeting with journalists who covered the conclave. A photo of Ugaz presenting the Pope with a traditional Andean scarf called a chelina captured the moment. It is this occasion, held 4 days after his election, that Pope Leo referred in his message, which was read aloud at the theater by Monsignor Jordi Bertomeu of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith and Apostolic Commissioner for the Sodalitium case. So yes, blah, blah, blah. It's lengthy. It says, to Paola Ugaz herself for her bravery in approaching Pope Francis on November 10th, 2022, and speaking up for herself and fellow journalists Pedro Salinas, Danielle Llovera, and Patricia Lachira, who exposed abuses by a religious group operating in multiple countries but originating in Peru. The Pope also acknowledges the broader harm caused by the Sodalitium, including financial abuses affecting entire communities such as those in Catacaos and Castilla. Apologies for the mispronunciations. Referring again to his remarks to media professionals on May 12, Pope Leo underlines that this was not just a formal greeting, but a reaffirmation of the sacred role of journalism. The truth does not belong to anyone. It is the responsibility of everyone to seek it, preserve it, and serve it, he says. I mean, it sounds really good. Those are some really good words. The Pope concludes with a heartfelt message to all Peruvian communicators: do not be afraid. Through your work, you can be builders of peace, unity, and social dialogue, be sowers of light in the shadows. And he expresses his hope for a church where no one must suffer in silence and where truth is not feared, but embraced as a path to liberation. Well, I've got really, really good news for Pope Leo. He is now the head of that church. And in the Catholic Church, a pope is, in essence, and this has been pointed out by more than one person, an absolute monarch, which means that there are things that he can do. And with past pontiffs, we have seen a pretty clear track record of general refusal to do a lot of those things that victims and victim advocates and activists have been calling for. So these are some really pretty words. You know, I do really love where he says, whenever a journalist is silenced, the democratic soul of a country is weakened, because I believe that that is true. I love his galvanizing words to the people of Peru. Do not be afraid. Be builders of peace, unity, social dialogue, all the rest. Those are really pretty words. But unless I see some type of substantive change, real change you can see, then he's no better than anyone else. Certainly no better than Francis, perhaps no worse, but unless there is action, words, they say the pen is mightier than the sword, but that's only when it can move people to action. Otherwise, it's just noise. Maybe very pretty noise, but noise nonetheless. So this is another article from Zenit. This is about this dispute over this Torre Ciudad, which is this facility, structure, building, property that has been under the care of Opus Dei. And there's been back and forths with Opus Dei and the bishop and the diocese, and the Vatican had to get involved at one point. It's been a whole big thing. Supposedly they reached some type of agreement, because basically it was about like who was responsible for the care and maintenance of this thing, which like maybe they're doing some kind of like rewilding thing, but their grass looks a little long in this picture. So it's been about like trying to figure out who's going to be responsible for it. In the subheading here, it says that the dispute erupted publicly in December 2022 when the Diocese of Barbastro Monzon declared the 1962 Enfituic contract governing the site null and void, accusing Opus Dei of breaching its conditions. Now that word, Enfituic, was a new one for me, and I actually looked it up, And relates to a type of legal agreement, specifically a long-term lease or concession of land or property, often associated with ecclesiastical or historical property managements or arrangements. So once again, this is about a religious organization and property that they have and problems with it. So this was published June 27th. The future of Torre Ciudad, a monumental Marian shrine in northern Spain, long associated with the Opus Dei prelature, remains in limbo as tensions persist from the Diocese of Barbastro-Monzon against the prelature. Recent media reports suggesting a resolution to the long-standing conflict have been flatly denied by Opus Dei's Spanish Communications Office, which insists that no agreement has been reached and that all parties are still awaiting a formal decision from the Vatican-appointed Pontifical Commissioner Monsignor Alejandro Arellano Cedillo. Appointed by Pope Francis in late 2024, Monsignor Ariano, the dean of the Roman Rota, was tasked with resolving a complex legal, canonical, and pastoral standoff that has been building since the diocese attempted to terminate a decades-old legal agreement with Opus Dei over the management of the Torre Ciudad complex. His recent audience with Pope Leo appears to confirm that the matter remains under close papal scrutiny. So like they said, it blew up in 2022. Because they were trying to say that this 1962 this contract governing the site null and void, and they said that Opus Dei had breached the conditions of the contract, so they wanted to have the key properties, which was most notably the image of Our Lady of Torre Ciudad, returned to their original location in the old hermitage, and they also indicated it would pursue legal restitution of the shrine, its guest house, and adjacent facilities unless an agreement was reached within 6 months, which, spoiler alert, it was not. And so this had kind of been building for a while, because they mentioned here 2020 Opus Dei had tried to reframe the complex as a diocesan sanctuary and regularize its status, but that hit roadblocks for whatever reason. And then in 2023, the diocese appointed a diocesan priest as rector, which was a dramatic break with precedent. People's heads exploded over that, because it was the first time in nearly 50 years that someone outside of Opus Dei's internal structure had held that position. And the decision triggered this further discord and ultimately led to the legal action from the diocese when they filed a conciliatory motion in civil court and threatened broader judicial claims if mediation failed. It says a speculation mounted in late June 2025 regarding a supposed compromise, reportedly including a joint system for appointing the shrine's rector and relocating the Marian image for certain feasts. Opus Dei moved swiftly to quash the rumors. We are still awaiting the resolution to be proposed by the Pontifical Commissioner, the prelature emphasized, signaling that no formal settlement has yet emerged from the Vatican. The diocese has remained publicly silent in recent days. However, Bishop Angel Perez Puello made waves earlier this year with a pointed remark during an interview. Quote, "No institution, however numerous, prominent, or influential, can claim ownership over popular devotion," end quote. The statement was widely interpreted as a direct rebuke of Opus Dei's historical stewardship of Torre Ciudad, a shrine whose modern form was inspired and promoted by the Opus Dei founder Jose Maria Escriva. This latest chapter in the Torre Ciudad saga underscores broader questions about ecclesial governance, property rights, and the interpretation of canon law in a post-Francis church. While the sanctuary prepares to mark the 50th anniversary of its construction, its legal and spiritual future remains in the hands of Rome. So this situation, watching it unfold since 2020, 2022, it's been moving at a glacial pace, and it has not been very exciting to watch unfold, to be perfectly honest. Not to me, anyway. Maybe if you're really into like real estate and real estate law or something like maybe that, I don't know. So you will be forgiven for not really knowing a whole lot about this and not being in the loop with where things are at. I also, admittedly, have kind of not talked about this a whole lot just because, again, it is so incredibly boring. But in essence, it really is about this like tug of war over this complex here between Opus Dei and the archdiocese there in Spain. And it's been very dramatic and like I said, very, very drawn out. And who knows what the end result will be. But I think that this quote attributed to that bishop is funny. "No institution, however numerous, prominent, or influential, can claim ownership over popular devotion." And it's funny, and I think that everyone was right in assuming that that was directed at Opus Dei, because Opus Dei has famously done that. Opus Dei, well, I should say, Jose Maria Escriva, and he seems to have passed this trait down throughout the organization structure. He really loves like claiming certain devotions, popular devotion, like a Marian devotion, for example, as like his special thing, or like Opus Dei's special thing. And like there are even Marian apparitions, rumors of Marian apparitions that are attributed to Jose Maria Escriva. Like I was reading, I think it was on Opus Dei Exposed, somebody was talking about how in their country, which is not America, their family was involved in Opus Dei, and they were never really a fan of it growing up, and so, you know, they got to see a lot of the like issues and inconsistencies and things that didn't make sense very clearly, because they weren't bought into it while the rest of their family, or at least their parents, were. And they were talking about how this person, their father, had told them this like story about how apparently one time back in like the early days, back before when they were like still huddling in an apartment because they didn't have anywhere else to meet, Jose Maria Escriva was like, he had said he wanted to be undisturbed in his room and he was going to pray, and then somebody like ignored that, or like interrupted him, and like went and knocked on the door and opened the door, and they said that they saw Jose Maria Escriva being cradled like a baby in the arms of the Virgin Mary, and he was like hovering above the floor. And this person very clearly believed it. So like there is a thread of that running throughout this organization in particular, where Jose Maria Escriva claims some things that, you know, he really doesn't have any claim to, like they're not original. And I feel like this shrine and this whole Marian statue situation is a really good example of that. And if you are interested, this piques your interest for whatever reason, like I said, on Opus Dei Exposed, there are people who have been talking about this, and you can kind of read through and see how former members are perceiving this, which I think is the most interesting to me, honestly, how they are perceiving these changes and these developments, because there's kind of two versions of reality. You know, there's the reality that we all live in, and then there's the reality that Opus Dei operates in. And if you have been in that organization, you become very familiar with that reality. And so I think you're able to interpret things that kind of are confusing, don't make a whole lot of sense at the time, in a very clear way, because within the Opus Dei context, something that seems meaningless to us normies, for the Opus Dei people, is actually very meaningful. So if you're interested, like I said, you can go and check that out. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I wanted to mention this again, just in light with the like general theme here today about like real estate and land trafficking, real estate fraud, whatever you want to call it. I thought like it was a worthwhile situation to mention. Get that out of there, my new word for the day. Oh, and then I'd pulled this up, just in case you didn't know what Torre Ciudad was. They kind of went over it in the video a little bit, but this here on Wikipedia, it says that it's a Marian shrine in Aragon, Spain, built by Jose Maria Escriva, consecrated on July 7th, 1975, under the title of Our Lady of Torre Ciudad. Devotion to Mary under the title of Virgin of Torre Ciudad is said to date back to the 11th century. So this is not an original thing at all. The Torre Ciudad Trust is responsible for the upkeep of the shrine and its financial needs. So there's some information for you. Looking through the chat. Frank McAvoy said, with the bait of a course, Opus Dei smacks of Scientology. Opus Dei does really like their courses, their annual courses, and the different trainings that you are supposed to do, for sure, for sure, for sure. Now, I think, my personal opinion, is that it's because these courses, which are never free, are a very good way to get a nice sizable financial boost from everybody once a year. You know, if you've got this annual course, you know, you have to go to, and like everybody goes to it, and it's not optional and you have to pay for it. Like, people don't question that too much. They really do love their courses though. And it's a very more to the point about it, like being kind of like Scientology. From what I understand about Scientology, and that it's not much, I've had like a casual passing interest in it over the years, but from my like general understanding, um, the thing that makes Scientology so dangerous, in my opinion, is that it has taken concepts from like psychology and sociology and psychiatry even, and has twisted that stuff to put their own spin on it. And I know Scientology is very anti like mental health care, mental health support. Like they don't, a Scientologist would never go to see like a psychiatrist or go to therapy or something like that. They would go to an auditing session instead. It's a very specific twist or like spin on the information that they've like glommed onto. And with Opus Dei, it's kind of the same thing. Like it's a very, I've talked about this before, it's a very specific flavor of Catholicism. And I think that if you weren't raised Catholic, have never been in the Catholic Church, could be forgiven for not recognizing that, because there is sort of a subculture within the Catholic Church that you just kind of take, you don't realize it's there unless you realize it's there. So you could be forgiven for not really realizing how much of an impact they have had, or realizing the flavor that they have. But as somebody who was raised Catholic, and by parents who they put a huge emphasis on like faith formation and catechesis and everything, we read a lot of books and studied a lot of different things and listened to a lot of different radio programs. And retrospectively looking back at it now, it's really interesting to see how much of it seems colored, how much of what I was taught seems colored by like this kind of opus mentality. And I don't really know what that means. I don't really know if that is an accurate representation of my experiences, or if that's just how it feels to me looking back now. There's all these different questions that I kind of have that I think about as I'm falling asleep at night. And one of them has been like to the extent to which an organization like Opus Dei can have an impact on people who are completely disconnected from the organization. And I think what I have started to really appreciate is how great that impact can be to people who are not in these organizations, have no connection to the organizations, who are not religious themselves. Like learning about some of the things that Enrique Rojas Montes has done, who is a very prominent Spanish Opus Dei supernumerary, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit in that respect. And yeah, it's interesting. Oh, Mike threw in that Italo Marsili's father was apparently murdered down the street from his office, because Italo, I believe, inherited his practice from his father, if I'm not mistaken, which again, Enrique Rojas Montes inherited his practice from his father. And Rojas's father was a legitimate professional, like a legitimate doctor, but the same, unfortunately, cannot quite be said of his son, and it seems the same could not be said of Italo Marsili. Yeah, Frank, you said, I don't think we know what Pope Leo will do. He's only been a pope a couple of months. Yeah, we have absolutely no way of knowing. He is a blank slate in a lot of ways. And I would be happy to have anything that I said earlier proven wrong. I'd be thrilled, honestly. I would never be so happy to be wrong in my life than for this pope to completely just change the course, the trajectory of everything, and like take it in a much more positive direction, because I do think he has the ability to do that if he so chooses. I would love to see that happen, truly. But it is early. It's hard to say what's going to happen. Skanergy said the founder was anything but a saint. Unfortunately, I am forced to agree with you. I'm working on an article right now for my Substack, which is called Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project. It's linked down below, should be. If you would like to go, you can subscribe for free. And then occasionally I do publish articles that you would have to pay a paywall fee to access, but most of what I write there is free. And I'm working on an article right now that is kind of about, well, I'm not going to give it away. You'll have to wait and see what it's about. But I was talking about, in that article, I talk about the cult of personality that I think, my opinion, based on everything I've read, Jose Maria encouraged within this organization that he like built up around himself, because I think, in my opinion, he was an insecure and narcissistic person who needed that kind of thing in order to make him feel better about himself. And so yeah, he was anything but saintly. Honestly, I find him to be a very sad character, if I'm being perfectly honest. When I read about his life and things that he wrote and what he was trying to do, like reading in Opus by Gareth Gore about the early days of the organization and everything that he was trying to do, honestly, it makes me, I again, this comes back to like the humanity and everything. I feel genuine sympathy for Jose Maria Escriva. I think that he was a deeply flawed and complex and potentially mentally ill person who would have benefited a lot from just a different life experience, honestly. But he ended up in that part of the world at that point in history, and you know, the rest has played out as it has. But seeing people refer to him as this like very saintly person, and his like feast day or whatever is in the month of June, so I was seeing all kinds of fluff from Opus Day about his her saint day or feast day or whatever, anniversary, whatever it is in June that they celebrate for Jose Maria Escriva. It's very hard to see him as a saint when you know any of the other stuff that has actually gone on, and yeah, I feel bad for him. Yeah, he behaved like a cult leader, because he was. And the psychology of cults and like cult leaders is so incredibly interesting to me. That's another thing that's been like cool kind of about the fact that I'm talking about all this terrible stuff, is that it has put me in contact with, or put people on my radar who are incredibly well educated and have spent, you know, the better part of their lives studying cult dynamics and like the behavior and the psychology of cult leaders. And it's really, really, really interesting. You strip away the like proper nouns and the times and the places and everything else, and it's really the exact same thing happening over and over and over and over again in these cults with these people. And you know, cults are not necessarily religious. You can have a secular cult. I mean, you could have a cult about anything, absolutely anything. And I think it's the reasons why that's able to happen is just so fascinating. So anyway, I've rambled enough. Let's talk about this article. We're getting to the tail end here. So this is an interesting one. El Financiero. This was published June 30th, end of the month of June. It says, with the rope around the neck, now it turns out we're adversaries of the world's greatest military power, thanks to the 4T government's intolerable relationship with organized crime. So this is a really interesting article, and I've mentioned in the past that I like reading news media about the United States that is not from the United States, just because I think it's interesting, it's illuminating, and it's important to take into consideration the perspectives of the people who are observing the country that I am living in. Because again, none of us exist in a vacuum. So it says, last week, 2 missiles fell near Palenque. Sorry if I mispronounced that, Palenque. The first was launched by the U.S. Treasury Department against 2 Mexican banks and the Vector brokerage firm owned by Alfonso Romo, accused of money laundering when he served as head of the office of the president in the Lopez Obrador administration. The second was launched by the Justice Secretary Pam Bondi when she singled out Iran, China, and Russia as adversaries for her country, and also targeted Mexico for trying to kill our children with drug overdoses. 2 missiles, one economic, the other political, aimed at the Lopez Obrador government, of which the current government claims to be the heir. It's no exaggeration to say that Lopez Obrador protected fentanyl trafficking to the United States, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths. He repeatedly denied that fentanyl was produced in Mexico, even though hundreds of clandestine laboratories had been discovered and destroyed under Sheinbaum's administration. His policy of hugs, not bullets, allowed for territorial expansion and the free movement of criminal groups. Quote, "They are people," end quote, he said. On at least 6 occasions, he visited Badiraguato, a town of fewer than 4,000 inhabitants, a land of drug traffickers and the headquarters of the Sinaloa cartel. Why were his movements guarded by El Chapo's Guzman's security forces and not the National Guard? What agreements were reached in those meetings? The government could provide information by publishing the minutes of those meetings. Since we can no longer request information from the INAI, with the current government eliminated, we will most likely end up finding out, as has been happening, through leaks from the U.S. government. On the other hand, the U.S. Treasury Department indicated that during the period in which Alfonso Romo worked under Lopez Obrador, Vector laundered millions of dollars related to fentanyl trafficking. Carlos Urzua, who served as Secretary of the Treasury during the first 2 years of the Lopez Obrador administration, stated in an interview with Reforma, quote, "Given that the leadership of the Office of the President handles a wealth of confidential economic information on a daily basis, one would wish that Alfonso Romo and his relatives up to the first degree did not currently hold any shareholding in the Vector brokerage house," end quote. Alfonso Romo, a far-right man who oscillated between Opus Dei and the Legionaries of Christ, who admired both Augusto Pinochet and Marcial Maciel, was, for 2 years, the second most powerful figure in the Mexican government, a close friend of Lopez Obrador, and a mediator between him and the business class. He received business leaders into believing that Lopez Obrador would not cancel the construction of the Texcoco airport, as ultimately happened. Today, Romo's close relationship with Lopez Obrador is taking its toll, even more so with the revelation that Vector laundered money for Garcia Luna, Lopez Obrador's pet nominee. Now it turns out we're adversaries of the world's greatest military, thanks to the intolerable relationship between the Fourth Transformation government and organized crime. Not only have they destroyed institutions and driven the country to near zero growth, now their actions and inactions have placed us as part of the new axis of evil. Nothing indicates that the revelations and U.S. attacks against Mexico will stop. On the contrary, they are just beginning. They will intensify as the trials of the Sinaloa cartel leaders progress. Visas have been canceled, and direct accusations have been leveled against Mexican institutions, banks, businesses, and the armed forces. The missiles will no longer fall near Palenque, but rather inside La Chingada, targeting the former president and his children. It has been known for years that Lopez Obrador used his family to raise money from politicians and businessmen, as well as from organized crime. The possibility, despite all kinds of evidence, that Lopez Obrador will ever be tried in the United States is very remote. He would first have to be tried in Mexico, and that option, with Moreno's takeover of the judiciary, is eliminated. In Mexico, he enjoys total impunity. They will be able to accuse governors, legislators, members of Morena, and the cabinet. They are also safe here. The institutions at the service of Morena will protect them, as they did with General Cienfuegos. The Mexican government will exacerbate nationalism, threaten to ally with the Chinese, and push for a wave of immigration, as Lopez Obrador did. But the mask will have already fallen. A significant portion of Mexican society will now be able to see them for what they are: corrupt and effective allies of organized crime. Week by week, the noose is tightening. As a Mexican, I deplore U.S. interventionism. As a Mexican, I applaud the exposure of the true nature of the Lopez Obrador government. The noose is already around his neck. As an American, I deplore U.S. interventionism. I think that if you look back at this country's history, there is a very well-established track record of this country interfering in affairs that it had absolutely no business interfering in, for very flimsy reasons that were concealing ulterior motives pretty much every single time. I just watched a really interesting documentary video about all of, or a good portion of, the U.S.'s successful coups in other countries. Again, there have been lots that were unsuccessful too, but the successful ones are the ones that are important to pay attention to because, they worked. And it was really, really, really interesting. It's really hard to learn about history and come away feeling like the United States is the good guy, frankly. And I think that's why history is so often kind of like whitewashed or downplayed or simplified, because you can't learn about the truth without coming away feeling very disenchanted with everything that you were taught to believe in. I feel like that's just the way that it goes. And it's kind of unfortunate because, that is how you create radicals too. People respond to finding out about the truth, respond to being lied to, oftentimes in very extreme ways, and you can create radical movements through that. So, yeah. Anyway, this was just an interesting article about an interesting person who is connected to Opus Dei, and I wanted to read it just because, again, it's a perspective of U.S. foreign activity that I think is important to keep in mind, and it's important to remember that away from U.S. soil, the United States government is not the good guy for a lot of nations around the world, and there are very, very, very good reasons for that. It's not casual. It's not some knee-jerk thing. There's historical precedent for it. Yeah. All right. So this is an interesting article, an exciting one. It's always awesome when somebody from the English-speaking world speaks out about an experience that they had with a high control group, just because, especially with Opus Dei, it's mostly a Spanish organization. The majority of its members are Spanish or, non-English speaking. So it's rare that somebody from the English-speaking world, and this is from Australia, but still it's rare that people like this speak out, and even rarer yet that the people speaking out are men. Predominantly from what we've seen so far for people speaking out about Opus Dei specifically, it's been mostly women who have been doing it, and there are a lot of different reasons for why that might be, but I do not think that means that men in this organization have suffered any less, right? Like, I don't think the one thing that you can say about Opus Dei is that the one thing you are guaranteed to be left with when you leave, if you leave, or whenever they dispose of you, you're no longer useful. The one thing you can be guaranteed to be left with is a very unique, almost bespoke type of trauma, and everybody acquires it in a different way, men and women alike. And so I really, really hope that more men will speak out and start sharing their experiences, because there are a lot of men in Opus Dei who are in positions of authority as well, or were, and who are hurting very deeply. And again, this comes back to the complexity of it all. I think sometimes it can be hard for people who were in positions of authority, who came out on the other side of it, realizing that, it wasn't a good thing, to also then have to come to terms with the fact that they perpetuated the unhealthy thing onto other people. I think that can leave you with a really unique type of guilt. And I think that could be a part of the reason why you don't see more men speak out. But I would hope that any man who is listening to this right now, if this applies to you, or if you are a man who has been through something and you feel like you can't speak out about it because you don't have the support, or that people won't understand, or it's been too long, so like you should just be over it now, those are all lies that we tell ourselves, or that people tell us in an effort to just get us to shut up, or get the bad thing to like go away for a while. But they are not true. And there are so many people who understand and relate to and have been through experiences being manipulated by a person or a group that they thought, going in, they had a much different perspective of, and who have come out the other side hurt. And you're not alone. It's not uncommon. You will be understood, and there's nothing to be afraid of. It's kind of like the old expression goes, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And I do understand when you've been a victim of something, speaking out can feel like an impossible obstacle, an impossible hurdle to overcome. But take heart, because there are people who are doing it, have been doing it, will do it in the future. It is possible. You can take that power back, and you are not alone. So let's read this article. Tim Pocock is an actor. He was in he's been in a bunch of different movies that I have to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think I've seen a single one of them. But I know him from what year did that come out? The 2023 ABC Four Corners documentary about the two par ed schools, Redfield College and Tangara School for Girls in New South Wales, Australia. It's two Opus Dei schools. He came up in an Opus Dei school, and he talks about his experience in that documentary. And full disclosure, it is very sad to listen to. Very, very sad. And he recently broke silence again and came out with this interview talking about his experiences, and I want to read it. So this was published June 29th by Eilish Delaney. I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly. Headline says, Tim Pocock thought he was getting help. Instead, his mom had set a trap. Australian actor Tim Pocock was just 23 when he was cast as young Cyclops in X-Men Origins Wolverine, landing in Hollywood opposite Hugh Jackman. Others will know him best from his role as Ethan in Dance Academy, but behind the glitz and glamour was a young man living a lie that was slowly destroying him. Tim grew up shaped by the strict influence of his devoutly Catholic mother. At 15, he started Redfield College in Sydney, a school with links to the controversial, secretive religious group Opus Dei. There, surrounded by rigid religious doctrine that condemned his very identity, he fought desperately to hide the truth about his sexuality. Opus Dei is a small but powerful organization within the Catholic Church known for its secrecy and conservative teachings. Some people are quick to label it a cult. For Tim, it was his prison, the only normal he'd ever known. Quote, until I started getting success in the entertainment industry and meeting a broader spectrum of humans, and I started to realize that my upbringing was maybe not quite as normal as I thought it was, he told Kate Langbroek on Mamma Mia's No Filter. The first 18 years of my life were very much unchecked by reality. His gay awakening began in the church, where he discovered his first crush, an altar boy in his local parish. It was such an innocent attraction, he said. I just enjoyed looking at him, and I kind of realized, oh, that's how the women in the movies that I watch look at men. I think I'm not meant to be looking at him like that. So it was already this thing that I didn't understand, but made me feel like there was some sort of barrier between me and maybe how I was meant to be. At Redfield College, Tim was trapped in a suffocating fishbowl. Is this going to start playing and blasting noise? Pause that. Says at Redfield College, Tim was trapped in a suffocating fishbowl of just 30 students in his cohort. It was really this very tight-knit, insular world where everybody knows absolutely everyone and everybody's business and all of that, he said. This religious group's approach to sexuality was strict. It is a godlike thing that they are doing to help someone who might be different to no longer be different, Tim explained. Where they see something as an act of charity or mercy or helping someone by helping them to stop being themselves ultimately ends up being something that hurts mental health and is only seen by the person experiencing it as manipulation. While other boys played cricket and rugby, Tim was smaller, different, drawn to opera singing. He became a walking target. Everyone, even though they had no clue that I was actually gay, they decided, he said. Tim hadn't even understood his own sexuality yet. I liked looking at boys. That's all I knew, he said. It felt like a disease that maybe puberty would cure, but it didn't. And there he is. He was such a cute kid. The bullying was savage and relentless for 10 years. It poisoned even his greatest joy, opera singing at the Sydney Opera House. Felt like I was living two lives at once, he said. By day, I was at school and really not enjoying myself at all and feeling really miserable. Then at nighttime, I was on stage in front of thousands of people, performing, singing, dancing, getting standing ovations. It didn't feel real, especially because what I was enjoying about life was the thing that was actually making me the target during the daytime. Every morning, Tim woke up begging God to cure him. Every night, he went to bed terrified of eternal damnation. We're taught that sin will cast you into hell, he said. I didn't make the choice to be gay. If I'd had choice about it, I would have preferred to have been normal, because then I wouldn't have to be carrying this huge ball and chain with me everywhere that I go. Tim felt utterly alone, unable to turn to his mother for fear of her reaction. I think she definitely knew. She would never talk about it outright, he said. She's always sort of just try and course correct. Don't sway your hips so much. Maybe try and lower your voice when you're talking. But it was all sort of such a shameful thing that you didn't bring it up. So it was just like this elephant. Oh, and there he is in his cute little opera performance. And that's like, opera is a discipline. Opera is a way of life. Opera is difficult. And it makes me so sad to think about somebody having a passion for something that takes so much discipline and dedication, and that being the thing that like he was punished for. Oh, it just makes me so sad. The unspoken fight exploded when Tim's mother discovered gay pornography in his room. I came home from work and she had torn every page out of the magazine individually and had laid them all across the dining room table like a tablecloth, Tim said. My dad was sitting at the kitchen counter, not saying anything, just looking down, and my mom was standing there. She was furious, and she kept saying, like, is this who you are? Is this what you have become? Tim's world tilted. In my head, I was thinking, what do you mean? What I've become? This is who I've always been. Tim's casting in X-Men at 23, woo, got a wind gust. Tim's casting in X-Men at 23 should have been a pure triumph. Instead, a week after filming Wrapped, his world shattered. His mother had stage 4 ovarian cancer. I came crashing down to earth very quickly after having that sort of career success, and then sort of the next few years, as I continued to act, she was just in and out of cancer treatments, he recalled. Then came another devastating blow. Tim discovered his father was having an affair with his mom's cousin. They didn't know that I had found out, and I didn't tell Mom. I made the choice not to tell her she was still battling the cancer, and I thought her body is literally breaking right now. I'm not going to be the one that breaks her heart too, he said. The hypocrisy was crushing. It angered me because I carried so much guilt about who I was as a person, and just the hypocrisy of knowing that two people who were part of that holier-than-thou judgmental community were going off and doing something that was, to me, actually wrong, he said. Yeah, you gotta love that. It's fucking rich. At 26, Tim was drowning in secrets and grief when his dying mother suggested therapy. He saw it as salvation. He was walking into a trap. I thought, fantastic. This is actually a great opportunity for me because I don't get to talk to anyone about being gay and how that makes me feel. I haven't been able to talk to anyone about how my dad's affair makes me feel, he said. The plaque by the door read, Catholic psychologist. Tim's blood ran cold. When I get in there, he tells me that he's part of Opus Dei and that he specializes in hypnotherapy for addictions, cigarettes, alcohol, or homosexuality. And then he kept bringing up these occurrences of his successful hypnotisms that have cured people of same-sex attraction. What followed was what Tim describes as psychological rape. Someone is essentially taking you out of your own mind where you're not in control of yourself. It's sort of like a roofie, so that they can then penetrate your mind against your wishes, and you become a puppet on their string, he said. Even though I'd spent my whole life praying the gay away and wanting to be changed, there was something so insidious about the tactics used in this occasion. For his dying mother's sake, Tim played along. Her months, her days were numbered. He said, I thought, I'll just play the part. But something inside him had snapped. On January 4th, 2012, Tim's mother died, believing her son was fundamentally broken. It's such a shame that she passed away with me knowing that's what she was thinking of me. Despite the damage she caused, Tim understood her motivation. Her beliefs were very extreme, but to her, what she was trying to do was save my eternal soul, he said. This was bigger than life and death. This was heaven and hell, and she was doing everything from a very loving place to ensure, in her mind, the ultimate best for me. But the losses weren't over. Tim's sister, his closest ally, delivered the final blow. I did come out to my sister, and it was very apparent right after that I was no longer welcome in her house, he said. We tried many times over the years to sort of bury hatchets, but the wounds are a bit too deep. The rejection destroyed him. In the space of 18 months, my mom was dead, my dad was married to my godmother, and now I don't have the sister that I always thought I had in my life, and so I just felt out of control, and I felt like I had no foundations, Tim said. Today, Tim lives openly with a loving partner, but the scars remain. There's always going to be those twangs of doubt, and always those little moments of fear, like, am I now a vocal spokesperson for Satan because I've written a book encouraging people to be themselves, he said. Ultimately, you get to the point where you have those demons, but you just put them in the corner and you tell them to be quiet. Tim's a vocal advocate for LGBTQIA+ rights and helped criminalize conversion therapy in New South Wales. His new book, The Truth Will Set You Free, Growing Up Gay in Opus Dei, is his weapon against the silence that nearly killed him. I was so reminded of how voiceless I felt when I was going through it and what I needed when I was younger, and that was someone to stand up for me because I wasn't able to stand up for myself because it was impossible, he said. So I thought I'm in a position where I get to be that voice now, and it would be irresponsible for me not to do so. I've pretty much written this book for my younger self. So, if you have not seen the New South Wales, the Four Corners, ABC Four Corners documentary about the schools, pirate schools in New South Wales. I did a reaction video to it back in 2023. You can go and watch. You can find the entire documentary for free on YouTube, and I believe I have it linked many different places on my channel and everywhere else. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend watching it. It is incredibly well done, very complete, and I think that while it is about a very specific location in a very specific part of the world, I think it does give us good insight into what things are actually like, how Opus Dei is behaving towards children specifically, which has been something I've taken a huge issue with, because I don't think that it is ethical. But if you want to understand how they are behaving towards children current day, then I don't think you need to look much further than that documentary, simply because across the board, you know, regardless of differences in region and dialect and everything, the Opus Dei modus operandi doesn't really change. It's the same playbook pretty much everywhere, regardless of, you know, differences in language and culture and everything. So highly recommend checking that out. I will be purchasing his book, even if it has to get here slowly on a barge all the way from Australia. I will be purchasing it and reading it, and I hope that if you have the ability to, you'll consider supporting his work as well, just because, like with Anne Marie Allen, like with Gareth Gore, like with now Tim Pocock, people who are willing to stick their necks out and tell the truth and share their experiences deserve support and deserve somebody behind their back for everything that they're doing, for sticking their neck out like that. Because you know, there's an expression that in the United States it's a sin to be right too soon, but I think really that applies to pretty much anywhere in the world. It's a sin to be too right too soon. And so when somebody is attempting to be a whistleblower or a canary in a coal mine about a really serious problem that nobody wants to look at, it can be a very isolating endeavor. And so I think it's really important that we uplift these victims, honor their experiences, and support their work and their advocacy, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what all this is about. It's about the people who have been through this and who have been hurt, and it's about getting something, creating a better world going forward, where the things that have happened to these people can't happen again. So anyway, I've just been sitting here as I've been talking, looking at this picture of Tim Pocock as a child. I'm gonna have to scroll up because I can't look at it too much longer. I'm gonna start crying. I really hate any type of bigotry. I really hate limited, small-minded thinking. I hate the boxes that we as people will put other people and other things into. It's so incredibly limiting, and it causes so much harm. And the only thing that I can think to do about it is to continue to talk about it, to uplift the voices of people who are trying to raise awareness about it, and to do everything that I can not to be a part of that problem, but instead a part of the solution. So I've mentioned in the past too that I think, you know, there isn't a ton of conversation about LGBTQIA plus people in Opus Dei, and that is probably because, well, for one thing, it's incredibly stigmatized, right? So somebody isn't going to talk about that until they come out on the other side, and maybe even then they might not still talk about it. But then also the organization is relatively small. They don't have even 90,000 members, despite what they claim worldwide. So it's a very small percentage of the population that's even in Opus Dei to begin with, and of those, it's going to be an even smaller subset that are in any way queer. So you don't see a ton of stories coming from people who are a part of that community talking about like what that was like for them. I think there have been 2 or 3 articles, including this one, that I can think of having seen within the last 6 to 12 months. But those experiences are still real. They're still happening, even if it's a smaller percentage of the people having negative experiences. You know, even if it's not a huge percentage of people in Opus Dei who are having bad experiences, who are also LGBTQIA in some way, like, even if it's not a huge percentage, it's still a percentage, and it's still happening. And I think Tim's incredibly sad story represents an experience for a lot of kids in these schools, these Opus Dei schools. Even like, you go back and if you look through the Opus Dei Awareness Network, odan.org, it's not really, it doesn't seem like the site has much activity going on anymore. It doesn't really seem like the people who set it up are actively monitoring it really anymore, but like, stuff is still on there archived, and you can read letters from parents who were writing to the people who were running the site at the time. This ODAN was more popular back in like following the Da Vinci Code days and everything, but parents were writing to the people running the site expressing concern about the safety and well-being of their children in Opus Dei schools. And in this particular case, this was in the United States that this was happening. There are several noteworthy Opus Dei schools in the United States. There's a situation right now playing out with the Heights, which is an Opus Dei school out east, that is pretty concerning. I'm not going to get into it too much yet, but if you want to do some independent research, you can go on Opus Dei Exposed and you can find it. I think Tim's experience in Redfield College probably is not totally unheard of in other Opus Dei schools around the world. At least has not been unheard of in the past. Who can say for what it's like present day? I mean, we simply have no way of knowing, but I think we can make some pretty good deductions based off of what we do know. So all love and support to Tim. I hope that everyone reads his book, and I hope that he finds the healing and the peace that I know he needs. All right, moving right along. How many do I have left? This is it. We got this one and one more, and then we are done. So this is from Los Angeles Press, not the city of Los Angeles, United States, though. This is a Spanish news site. Maybe it is for the city of Los Angeles, but it's a Spanish news site. And the headline says, how real is the Catholic Church's zero tolerance? Over the past decade, a zero tolerance approach to sexual abuse has become commonplace in the Catholic Church. This was published June 30th by Rodolfo Soriano Nunez. And let's read what it says. Observing how the notion of zero tolerance is used dispels any idea of a real understanding of what it entails. The notion of zero tolerance has become a motto, a slogan, as evidenced by various cases around the world. A central element of the Catholic Church's discourse has been a zero-tolerance approach to clerical sexual abuse. Last week, on Friday, June 20th, the Peruvian media were delighted to report on a pastoral letter from Pope Leo to Paolo Ugaz, which we went over earlier, one of the journalists who risked jail to expose abuse within the Sodalizio de Vida Cristiane. At the same time, new information about cases in the Spanish-speaking world demonstrates how far the Catholic Church has learned the lessons of the crisis and the need for a truly zero-tolerance policy with consequences. Leo's letter emphasizes the suppression of this group while praising Ugaz and other journalists. Although it doesn't explicitly address zero tolerance, there is a paragraph where he speaks of the need to not tolerate any form of abuse. Jordi Bertomeu, an official of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith in charge of investigating and suppressing the Sodalizio, read the letter on June 19th at the premiere of a play that recounts the saga of Ugaz and other journalists. The Sodalizium was similar to a religious order, but more like a corporate holding company with deep-rooted sectarian behavior, so damaging to the Catholic Church itself that, before his death, Pope Francis suppressed them. This is Vatican News in both Spanish and English, published brief text about the letter. It says, unfortunately, despite the letter from the Pope and the efforts of Francis, such as suppressing the Sodalizio, in the face of the gravity of the crisis, the Catholic Church uses the notion of zero tolerance more as a campaign slogan, as explained in the previous installment of this series for the case of the Legion of Christ, linked after this paragraph, than as a formal policy with consequences for failure to meet precise objectives and accountability. Leo is not alone in his call for vigilance, transparency, and a willingness to acknowledge and correct errors. Before the conclave elected Cardinal Prevost, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, SNAP, also demanded a genuine zero-tolerance policy. To do so, SNAP adopted a proposal developed by Nate's Mission, a U.S. NGO available only in English on its website. It is clear, then, that the time has come for the Catholic Church to articulate a genuine zero-tolerance policy capable of overcoming its use for propaganda purposes. To achieve this, it is necessary to consolidate the three dimensions identified by Leo: vigilance, transparency, and a willingness to acknowledge and correct errors and provide teeth to any measures it might take in this regard in the future. While Leo decides what he will do, we must delve deeper into how the idea of zero tolerance came to be in Catholic discourse, as there is a gap between the stated objectives, what is happening, and the fact that the Catholic Church still fails to even recognize many survivors as victims of abuse. Although now common in Catholic discourse, the concept emerged after the debacle of the late 20th century. Despite its current prominence outside of the United States, Canada, Australia, and France, there is little evidence of a real and effective appropriation of what it entails. The Catholic adoption of zero tolerance occurred at the beginning of this century, following a dialogue held in Dallas between bishops and various groups within the Catholic Church in the United States. This meeting gave rise to the current charter for the protection of children and young people. Dallas was similar in several ways to the meetings the German Catholic Church holds roughly every decade, known as the Synodal Way, or Der Synodal Weg. It follows a proactive understanding of the dialogue within the Catholic Church, and as such, is a precursor to Pope Francis's Synod on Synodality, a call to build a synodal church that, to no one's surprise, brings out the worst and the most reactionary factions within the church. Yeah, people's heads exploded when that came out. I remember that. Even as an outsider, I remember when that hit and people's heads were exploding. Despite the now common notion of zero tolerance, the battle of then leader of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and now emeritus of Washington, D.C., Cardinal Wilton Daniel Gregory, was difficult to anticipate. He was only able to do so after the bankruptcy generated by decades of denial, manipulation, and harassment by survivors by previously powerful clerics such as Cardinal Bernard Law. Law presided over the Catholic Waterloo and over the Catholic, I think they mean diocese of Waterloo and Boston, until then one of the richest archdioceses in the United States and the epicenter of the global crisis as described in the film Spotlight in 2015. And that's one of my favorite movies. Many Catholics, both hierarchical and lay, remain determined to discredit abuse allegations and defend predators. The previous installment of this series demonstrated how John Newhouse, a leading figure in conservative thought in the English-speaking world, supported Marcial Maciel in 2002 in just such a way. In November 2001, Gregory became the unlikely leader of the USCCB. He was Bishop of Belleville, a diocese of nearly 100,000 faithful, less than 13% of the population of its 28-county Illinois parish, and the first African-American to hold the position. Despite the difficulties, Gregory saw change, forced by the proactive attitude of the police, media pressure, and his own understanding of the scope of the crisis. Thus, throughout various versions of the charter, criteria have emerged for what in the United States is a zero-tolerance policy. Part of the experience is evident when searching the websites of Tutela Minorum, the Catholic Church's body that addresses the issue. A search of zero tolerance returns 12 results, ranging from May 2024 to February 2025. All right, I'm going to skim through this because this is very long and very, very detailed. They reference this case, the case involving the Juan Cuatracasas, who was convicted of having abused his son. And then there was also, they mentioned Juan Luis Cipriani, who I've talked about quite a bit here in recent newsroom analyses, because he's also a member of Opus Dei who has had some allegations made against him of abuse. Says both cases involving Opus Dei, that of Cardinal Cipriani and the refusal to accept that abuse took place at the school in Gatzalueta, Spain. Oh yeah, there was that happened. Offer clear examples of how zero tolerance remains propaganda. In January, the world learned that Cardinal Cipriani, Archbishop Emeritus of Lima, Peru, had received something of a punishment for his role in the abuse of a young boy in his care, although there was never a formal announcement of the punishment or the reasons why Rome imposed it. Cipriani's case evokes similar punishments handed down to Mexican Marcial Maciel and Chilean Fernando Caradima. First, because the true extent and reason for the punishment remains secret, a sort of private agreement between the Pope and the guilty party. It involved a life of prayer and restrictions on the use of clerical vestments and, in general, on acting in public as a priest. But, despite that, Cipriani still ended up showing up to the Vatican to Francis's funeral in, cardinal garb. So clearly that meant absolutely nothing to him. Says the Cipriani case highlights the profound disconnect between the frequent allusions to zero tolerance and what has been observed in the attitudes of the top leaders of the Catholic Church, which is undergoing a global crisis of confidence. In this sense, it's clear that something is wrong when an institution talks about zero tolerance, but it is actually unable to implement the already timid sanctions against predatory and disloyal clerics like Cipriani, as explained in the article linked after this paragraph. That's this one right here. Let's see. A zero-tolerance approach was officially adopted by the USCCB with the aforementioned statute, known as the Dallas Charter, which they unanimously approved in June 2002 after the USCCB hierarchy acknowledged that it had tried to minimize the magnitude of the problem. Let's see. It says there is evidence of abuse of women, whether minors or not, by male clergy, as evidence in the text linked above about the abuse of a Mexican nun, and by other nuns, as evidenced by the one that appears after this paragraph. This headline says a former novice reports sexual abuse in Mexico. Despite all the problems, the charter and the report given that the UCB was willing to seek solutions. It paid for the study at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, a prestigious public university with an excellent criminology program, rather than a Catholic university like Georgetown. Although some in the USCCB wanted to petition Rome to remove priests from ministry for child abuse at the end of the 20th century, zero tolerance lacked full support. There were divisions stemming from the fact that zero tolerance mimics the zero tolerance policies in the criminal justice system in that country. It cannot be ignored that the report and the development of a zero tolerance policy came after scandals in dioceses in Louisiana and Massachusetts dating back to the 1980s, when priests retained their positions despite repeated cases of abuse. And they outline some of those cases here. Says the USCCB, like bishops in other countries at the time, were plagued by profound disinterest in addressing the issue, complicit attitudes implicated in what Robert Sipe called the Scarlet Bond, and a clear predisposition on the part of the Catholic hierarchy to play the victim. Robert Sipe is a researcher and an author. He co-wrote a book called Sex, Priests, and Secret Codes, the Catholic Church's 2,000-year paper trail of abuse, and it is very comprehensive and honestly pretty easy to read considering all the information that it covers. And that book was written and published back in the 90s, but I read it within the last 3 years or so, and it is shocking how much of what he discusses reflects current day attitudes, with, at least to my perception, reflects current day attitudes within the Catholic Church. And it's kind of shocking to see truly how little has substantively changed over the years, as people have been calling for accountability and justice and an end to the Catholic Church's inability to keep people safe from predators. Says the USCCB has acted not so much of its own volition. It did so in response to an avalanche of reports, journalistic, academic, personal, and other, that revealed patterns of disregard for early signs of abuse. Sometimes this disinterest resulted from a shortage of personnel within the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church itself limits the number of those authorized to perform certain rites, but other factors often play a role. So it's not as if the USCCB undertook this charter because they recognized the problems. They were sort of forced to come to terms with it because of all of the news media, press coverage, and people speaking out. And so many times you see that that's exactly how this stuff plays out. People don't want to take any accountability and don't want to admit that anything is wrong until they literally cannot avoid it any longer, and then it's a friggin' mess. And it all could have been avoided if people were authentic and honest and did the right thing in the beginning, which at this point was nearly 30 years ago. Sorry, hitting my table. So, yeah, I completely pick up everything that they're saying in this article. And this article is very comprehensive. It includes a lot of historical context for everything that they are saying, and building a case for why it is that the Catholic Church has done what it has done. Let's see. I'm not going to read through every single one of these examples because it is quite, like I said, it's very in-depth. They're going over specific individuals and specific countries that were protected by specific mechanisms within the Catholic Church. Let's see. I'm trying to decide what more I want to read. So apparently Francis cited Benedict XVI as an inspiration for his own approach to dealing with abuse in the church, which is maybe potentially a little bit of a red flag, because people are pretty critical of Pope Benedict and the things that he did and did not do during his papacy. So it's kind of interesting that Francis would cite him as like the motivating factor. But they say that the fact that he does this makes it necessary to delve deeper into the role of Ratzinger and Benedict XVI in the use of zero-tolerance approaches, a central topic of the next installment of this series. So if you're interested in following this, you can go and follow the Los Angeles Press. You can find their publication work and everything. I mean, they've got so much in here. They have PDFs that are hyperlinked in here. They have media outlets that they are citing. They're talking about particular people during particular. If you want a little bit of a deep dive, I think this article would be a good place to start, just talking about like the Catholic Church's position, zero tolerance position, and like what that actually means and how real it actually is. It's really hard to read stuff like this and not come away feeling like it's kind of all just a bit lackluster. All right, last but not least, a newsroom analysis would not be complete without some mention of the psychiatrist Enrique Rojas, or one of his offspring. So this is a article that was published under Healthy Living, and I'm going to assume this translates to Vanity of Vanitatis, some type of fluff news magazine site. And these are the types of sites that publish the things that Enrique Rojas has to say. It's interesting, but the headline says that they're presenting him and his key questions for addressing a relationship crisis. And it's a practical and reflective approach proposed by the psychiatrist that invites couples to take control of their emotional life with emotional responsibility. He says that doing that through, through his Instagram. He's been promoting these ideas. I've talked about like the pop psychology stuff that he shares on his Instagram back when I did my deep dive into the guy. So if you are interested, you can go and check that out. But this is very much in line with like the type of like kind of sugary, fluffy pop psychology type stuff that he like has made his bread and butter. It says, for the expert, love requires not only feelings, but also conscious care, emotional intelligence, and above all, a firm will to stay together. In the face of a relationship crisis, in this publication, Enrique Rojas proposes 3 essential questions that can help address the problem and find ways to improve the relationship. Okay, great. And, you know, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist myself, so I'm not going to like pass judgment on whether or not the things that he has to say are helpful or in any way illuminating to people who are dealing with relationship problems. But what I will say is that I find it very, very scary that somebody like Enrique Rojas, who has, you know, gotten people locked up in mental institutions when they were perfectly sane and did not deserve to be there, and who helped collaborate with the husbands of women to get custody of their children, and all of the other really dirty things that he's done, right, involving couples. I find it really creepy that like he's giving advice on how what good relationship navigational strategies might be, just because he doesn't seem to me like somebody who would have any concept of what that would look like in any way, shape, or form. In my opinion, his moral compass is just completely debauched. But yet, he continues to find a happy home for his garbage on Spanish media sites all over the place. So, and I continue to see them and read them, and I will continue to have an opinion of them, because after spending 9 months researching this guy, I have a very well-informed opinion, I can assure you. So, whoops, that's me. That's the background. That is the end of the news for this past month of June. It's been a really interesting month. We've seen some interesting headlines come out. It's been interesting watching Opus Dei and these other religious organizations react to changes in Vatican power and everything. There are some interesting things playing out with different real estate and financial holdings that I think will be interesting to keep an eye on. And as always, there are people working their tails off to share their experiences and to tell the truth and to raise awareness about the things that they experienced. And that is always a beautiful thing to see. So a little bit of a mixed bag this week, but I hope you guys enjoyed kind of seeing what happened within the last month. People Unite. If you are confused about what I was talking about at any point, you can back the cursor up, back the video up and rewind and watch. And then also this will be going live whenever I am done here. It'll be saved to the Deep Dive Project's YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access it there. But then also don't forget that I am talking about news articles. So if there's a news article that you don't understand the context for, go and pull it up in my source document down below, and you can read that article. And if you have questions, you can take that and run with it. That is really what I want to encourage people to do. Take what you are hearing today and do your own research, ask your own questions, take it on board. Don't believe everything you see, don't believe everything that you hear, ask some questions, be critical thinkers, and hopefully we can start moving towards a more well-informed society where we can quit handing our power over to charlatans. Mike said Cipriani is an extremely high-end restaurant in New York City. That's interesting. I did not know that. Yes, Philo Sofando 89 said this article is very complete. I'm sure you're talking about that last one that I read. Yeah, from Los Angeles Press. Great context. Very in-depth. Hats off to the journalist who wrote that and put that all together, because that is some hard work. Ask me how I know. Very, very complete, very well written article. Lots of the articles I thought today, the Animal Politico article I thought was excellent as well, and all of the press about Anne Marie Allen's story and everything coming out. And also we have Tim Pocock now, his book is coming out, so it's a good time to be well informed. Thanks so much for being here for this entire thing. You know, these streams are usually about 2.5 hours. That seems to be the quickest I can get through it. So I appreciate your attentiveness and your interest in everything that I am discussing. Truly, truly, it means so much. If you are interested in connecting with me in any way, shape, or form, links and all the rest are down in the description of this video. My virtual tip jar is linked at the top of the chat, but you are, of course, not obligated in any way to financially support what I am doing. Just being here and giving me your time and attention truly means so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. For the time being, I think that is where I'm going to wrap it up. So as always, as I always say, let me go ahead and close my browser here and fix myself back into center. But as I always say at the conclusion of every single episode or live stream that I do, resources down below should you need them, mental health resources should you need them, resources to connect should you need them, and what else am I forgetting? Go over to my channel, take a look around. If you're new and you haven't seen a whole lot yet, take a look around. I've got a lot of content over there, and it isn't all about Opus Dei. I have a playlist that is all just interesting documentaries that I have found for free on YouTube that are about like human rights issues and the environment and that kind of thing, which is kind of my bread and butter, kind of what I am primarily interested in. So if that sounds like something you'd be intrigued by, go check it out. Otherwise, that is where I'm going to end it for today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And as always, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.